Okay, it is 3 o'clock. We will call this Salina City Commission study session to order. And I believe I'm going to look to Mr. Jeff Hammond to get us started.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioners. Jeff Hammond, Parks and Recreation Director. Today we have for you as a study session a presentation from the Salina-Saline County War Memorial Group. They're proposing an improvement project or an add-on project to the existing War Memorial at Sunset Park. I have a few comments leading up to this and I'll be brief. For a historical context, in September of 1993, a license agreement was constructed and approved via resolution number 93-4645. The Salina-Saline County War Memorial Group proposed raising all funds and in-kind services necessary for the construction of a concrete and bronze monument, which would be located at Sunset Park. And it was a license agreement done in 1993. Some of the notable items of the license agreement, the memorial was to be constructed with strictly private funding. However, the plan review was subject to city's approval and their permit process. It was also constructed within plans and specifications that were pre-approved by the city. The term of the license, once the memorial was installed and approved, it was dedicated to the city, and that was in July 1st. July 1st of 1994. They required insurance. They were required to provide the city insurance policy that the risk manager approved. And it was done in coordination with the city. Secondly, in February of 1994, there was a grant agreement where the city sold surplus land in the amount of $29,000. And that surplus was given as a grant to the Salina-Saline County War Memorial, and for the purpose of contributing to the cost of the decorative eagle and the decorative plates, bronze plates, as part of the project. It also gave some further context to what to do with excess funds. So if the War Memorial Group had excess funds, they were to turn that over to the city, and that would become a maintenance fund for that structure or that improvement. At the start of the year, that War Memorial Maintenance Fund had a balance of $30,843. We have been using that fund this year. You might be aware that there was a vehicle that damaged a monument wall at Sunset Park, and that was replaced about a month and a half ago, and city staff are now putting the bronze plaques back on. They've already got the plaque back on. They're started the letters this week and should be completed shortly. That was at a cost of $8,960. Later this month, we are having a bronze restoration specialist come into the park and refurbish all the bronze. It's been some time since that occurred. That's at a cost of $17,800. That would bring the balance of that fund to about $4,000. Master plan items related to Sunset Park War Memorial. There's a number 44 on the master plan, indicated a need to upgrade the lighting around the memorial to make it more of a destination feel or destination attraction. And my last point is on February 15th of this year, the Salina-Saline County War Memorial Group presented before the advisory board, Parks and Rec Advisory Board. They overwhelmingly, they all voted to make a recommendation for support of this project. They didn't really have any questions. There are questions relating to funding, how it will be funded. And I indicated that, I'm sorry, city funding. They questioned if there's any city funding. And I stated that at that time there was not a dedicated funding source for such a project. But at this time, I will turn it over to the Salina-Saline County War Memorial Group and let them take it from there.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners, City employees, and community members. My name is Rachel Constantino, and it's truly an honor to be here today to present to you the proposed Salina County War Memorial Expansion Project. I'd like to let you know that the current committee formed 24 years after the previous committee disbanded following the completion of this war memorial designed by my father, Gene Hind. The following individuals serve as officers on our committee: Stan Britt, William Vineyard, he's not here today. Second chairperson, myself. Treasurer and expansion designer, Ben Vidrickson II. His father also served on the previous committee as the finance chair, Senator Vidrickson. The architect for this expansion project is Warren Ediger. Now, the previous committee documented Saline County service member deaths from 1861, the Civil War, all the way through the Persian Gulf War in 1992. Our committee would like to document service member deaths and notable conflicts from that time forward. Our committee has no plans of disbanding following the completion of this expansion project should it occur, as the need to honor service members and recognize military conflicts is ongoing. To proceed let me step back here. Local veteran organizations since 1994 have expressed a demand through the organizations and to us for continuing the sales of inscribed paving bricks, which you see there. In order to continue doing this, the 501c3 organization would need to be reinstated, and expansion of the memorial site would need to occur. War memorials are important to communities because those honored at war memorials may have lost their lives far from the city, but the effects of their loss can be felt in the grief of communities, classes, ethnicities, and nationalities, truly forming a bond between the citizenry. War memorials act as historical touchstones linking the past to the present, enabling people to remember and respect the sacrifice of those who died, fought, participated, or were part of conflicts. On Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and throughout the year, citizens pause to reflect on these touchstones of remembrance here in Salina and to absorb the deeper message and meaning that they convey. Now I'd like to review some military statistics for Saline County. According to the census, there are 4,036 vets in Saline County. Most common service periods include the Vietnam War, Gulf Wars, World War II, and the Korean War, which is not listed there. According to the Adjutant General's Office, the Kansas National Guard employs 47 full-time technicians, 66 full-time Army Guard and Reserve soldiers. According to Salina Airport Authority, in 2022, there was a direct military exercise economic impact of $5,958,550. Here is a list of local military units and partners. Now, the 425th Transportation Company should be included on this list. Following are local nonprofit military support organizations that conduct military programs, events, and activities. And as you can see, there are quite a few. And then we have another slide as well that the list continues. Okay. Now, there are 2 community covenants which have been signed in 2010 and 2013 in Saline County. And I would like to show you a video pertaining to the one that was signed in 2010.
This is a Riley TV News Break.
If you took a map of the United States and you put your finger right in the middle, you would probably land here, Salina, Kansas. Truly middle America, truly heartland of America, and truly a city that has historically supported military families. An all-America city, Salina was recently voted the #1 city in Kansas to raise children. So it isn't surprising that the town has a great history of support for the area's military families. It made headlines during the Vietnam War when the decommissioned Schilling Air Force Base was converted into Schilling Manor, the only base in the history of the United States set aside for the wives and children of soldiers serving in Vietnam. It was Salina's history of support for military families which brought city leaders, Fort Riley, and 1st Infantry Division leadership together for the signing of the Army Community Covenant. The covenant is a formal recognition of and commitment to the families of the 1st Infantry Division's Combat Aviation Brigade.
With the establishment of the partnership, we're going to be able to bring our soldiers up here to participate in numerous community events, fairs, parades, high school events, and in return, the community leaders from Salina and Saline County can come to Fort Riley, take tours of the airfield and show them what we do, therefore kind of showing them another side of the military that they probably haven't had a chance to experience before.
Had a long history here in Salina and continue to provide unique resources to our military. There's a mutual relationship there that we both benefit from, and we're proud and happy to recognize that relationship with our military. Certainly honor the sacrifice that their families make and that they make for us and the rest of our country, and we're proud to be here today to recognize that and to again just mutually honor the benefit that we both receive from our proximity and our close relationship.
Thank you.
Through the covenant, communities pledge to create partnerships that support the strength, resilience, readiness, and quality of life for soldiers and their families. The covenant, signed by cities like Salina, Kansas, is truly one of the key elements in a plan to restore balance to the United States Army. Edward Faircloth, 1st Infantry Division, Public Affairs, Fort Riley, Kansas.
You're watching.
Okay. Now, on July 10th, 2013, Saline County again committed to supporting Kansas National Guard service members and families at a community covenant signing to launch the National Joining Community Forces Initiative, spearheaded by the former First Lady Michelle Obama and Jill Biden. Salina was recognized by the Kansas National Guard as the model military-friendly community in Kansas and was used to launch the campaign. As you can see, our community has a long-standing history of supporting the military and their families. So when I learned that upgrading the War Memorial ranks 44th out of 187 project priorities listed in the Parks and Rec Comprehensive Master Plan, placing it in the top 25% of priorities, I was not surprised. Now, in the Parks and Rec Master Plan, it suggests expanding the lighting, as Jeff said, to a commercial destination level to make it an attraction destination in Kansas. And now I would like to turn over the presentation to Ben.
For phase one, as Jeff mentioned, someone ran into a marker wall and destroyed that, and it has already been taken care of. Also, site preparation for installation of a monument to honor Major Dennis Pugh, a former Salinan that was declared missing in action after his aircraft was shot down on March 19, 1970 during the Vietnam War. The Sons of the American Legion Squadron 62 paid for the monument and all related construction. In addition, I'm sorry, I mentioned this already. Like I said, the marker wall's already been taken care of, and the restoration's going to happen, as Jeff mentioned, and we'll also be looking at repairing some of the bricks. So the restorations to the existing site are being paid for through the maintenance fund established by the previous committee and held by the city of Salina. The restoration company that will provide the services is charging almost $18,000. The company recommends the memorial undergo cleaning on an annual basis, as that is how long it takes for the sealant and the wax coating that's exposed to the elements. Cleaning costs an estimated $5,000 up to $7,000 each time and would increase with the proposed expansion. Okay, this is the existing Walk of Honor, and that is one of the actual bricks there. As you'll see where the flagpoles are, how it jets into a V. The other side is not symmetrical. We will be making it symmetrical in our new design. And also will be, these are some of the bricks that were in the original. So we will be available for military members, civilians, and groups. So the addition of the Walk of Honor will expand to the east and the west with paving bricks that border 8 quadrants of green turf. You'll notice 2 new monuments will be placed in the center of those areas. And we already have a website, and we are selling bricks, and we weren't able to find a perfect match, but we're still working on it, and we're hoping to find something out this week, but they'll be pretty close. We will keep the same 2 lines of lettering as before, but will not offer the 8x8 paving bricks. And that shows you the overview of the monument signage is not present in that rendering there. So this is a closer picture of the octagon concrete seating. The concrete bench tops will provide a base for 8 granite panels, which will be inscribed with historical content, including conflicts and military actions. So we'll have history. And the Salina-Saline County War Memorial will decide the historical content for the initial and the future panel etchings. And those are some of the wars that we've studied so far that will probably be listed on the etching. If permissible, we would like to provide donors with the option to sponsor a granite panel for $5,000 to help in our fundraising. The donor would receive name recognition at the bottom of the panel. And as you see here, the sponsor info is currently located at the bottom of the panels at the existing war memorial. You see the names at the bottom. Mayor Hoppick issued a proclamation recognizing March 19th, 2023 as Major Dennis Pugh Remembrance Day in the city of Salina. Thank you for that. There's going to be a POW monument dedicated this Memorial Day in Sunset Park for Dennis Pugh. And the next slide is a picture of, well, this actually shows where it's going to be located. That's correct, right there. Thank you. And that's a look of the monument. It has a pedestal with a tablet with inscription. And basically, phase 2 is getting on with the concrete work and the inlaid brick, and the octagon benches will be done off-site and then brought onto that location. We are looking at running some electricity to those new monuments, possibly tying in with some of the new lighting for the park.
Thank you, Ben. Okay. Project estimate for the expansion is $335,000. This project will be funded through donations, grants, in-kind donations, sales of the Walk of Brick of Honor, and fundraising events, as well as the granite panel sponsorships, should they be approved by you guys. So in consideration of these facts, that Salina has a long-standing history of supporting the military, upgrading the war memorials in the top 25% of 187 project priorities listed in the master plan, and there's a demand from the community to inscribe additional bricks and recognize notable conflicts and deaths from 1992, we would like to propose a public-private partnership with a project estimated to cost $335,000. The mention of 50% here is merely listed as a starting point based on other public-private partnerships. If there's a recommendation from commissioners or guidelines from city staff that can provide funding based on the park's master plan priorities, the arts and humanities care and maintenance of the public art collection, or any other city resources, whether it's cash or in kind, which would help offset the cost of the $335,000, we would sincerely appreciate that. I would like to let you know that any funds raised beyond our goal would pay for marketing expenses and go into the City of Salina Maintenance Fund to provide assistance with future repairs and restorations. Since it's important to us and to you guys that the war memorial can be cared for far into the future, our plan would be to sell inscribed paving bricks throughout the year. 30 to 40 is a reasonable goal after I've spoke to other cities who are offering the same program within their communities. So if we met our goal of 700 bricks, there would be 700 blank bricks remaining to inscribe on site over the years. Now, as far as community outreach goes, we would do a citywide mailing. The previous committee, when they would do this, they would receive 200 to 300 brick orders at once, and in 2 years, they sold 1,350 bricks. Following is signage that was in the park prior to construction for the previous memorial, and we would like to propose the opportunity to do something similar. Here are additional ways that we would engage the community. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, last slide. I would like to close with this. Our war memorial reflects triumph, courage, heroism, patriotism, and camaraderie. Arguably, it is timeless. Therefore, we are truly grateful to the citizenry and leaders of Salina for supporting efforts in the past to construct the current war memorial. And we will be extremely grateful in the future if that support continued as we seek to recognize additional service members and honor past conflicts. We sincerely appreciate your time today. Please let me or other committee members know if you have questions.
Okay, I'll look to city staff first to see if you have any additional comments you'd like to make before.
I don't know that we do, other than I guess I would suggest that we can bring this to you as part of the outside agency funding request as you go through the budget process. That'd probably be the most appropriate place to pick up that conversation. But I don't know if Jeff has anything to add in terms of status of maintenance or repairs and.
Before the end of the month is over, we'll have some of these, the monument wall, that phase one that Rachel spoke about and Ben spoke about. And then the bronze restoration will take 2 weeks, to be the end of this month into the 1st of May, preparing the site for that Memorial Day service. Of all the master plan items for Sunset Park, there's only one. I wanted to give a little more detail. There's only one that is related to the War Memorial, and it's that lighting component. There's not a cost associated with it. We don't have a lighting plan. So we don't have a lighting design either. We don't know how many fixtures or poles, so that budget number we don't have a budget number related to that. But
what is the timeline here on the fundraiser? I assume the project won't start until all the money's raised.
I would defer that to Rachel.
Yes. We think a reasonable goal would be 18 months to 2 years with the use of social media, and we plan to meet 2 to 4 times a month. I feel that that's a reasonable goal, especially if we have the opportunity to sell the granite sponsorship panels.
It talks about an estimated $5,500 to $7,200 a year for maintenance. Who would be responsible for that?
That was a quote from the person or company who's doing the restoration, the bronze restoration this month. They provided that number as an average, depending on where, depending on weather, depending on existing conditions of the site. But then that would come out of that War Memorial Maintenance Fund.
Okay.
That we would, that it is a dedicated fund just for that purpose that's within the city.
Does it really need to be done yearly, or would a biannual thing be a possibility?
I think that's recommended. The current bronze at Sunset Park hasn't been done for several years, 7 to 10. So that's why that's why it's closer to 18,000, 17,800 to do it properly now. So
Is that annual washing and waxing, is that something that could be done by park staff?
we don't do bronze restoration. We do bronze cleaning, and we do that in-house.
That's what I mean, cleaning and wax. I'm a little sticker shocked at that price.
It's my understanding.
Wash and wax.
Bronze restoration is you're
Those
using
are
a
two
heat
different
gun.
things.
Yes.
Restoration and cleaning
Correct.
and waxing.
Correct. We have not done bronze restoration in-house in our park staff. Involves heating up the bronze, opening up those pores, applying the wax, heating it again. That's not something we do. But we do maintain bronze within the cemetery. So we're not unfamiliar with the maintenance of bronze, but not the restoration of bronze.
Right.
Is the lighting part of, proposed lighting part of the parks plan or part of the committee's plan?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the
Oh,
question?
is the proposed lighting part of, would that be a Parks and Recs project or from the Memorial Committee?
If I'm not correct, the committee can correct me, but I don't believe the lighting plan is part of their $335,000. I think that's for what you saw today, which was the granite and bronze. We would do that independently as a separate project at the time in which there's a construction or improvement project going on in the park.
The lighting was the element that was identified as part of the park master plan as a recommendation. The expansion wasn't part of the park master plan.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I might just interject in terms of care and maintenance, and this kind of crosses over because of the uniqueness of the private entity and the arrangement that the city had made, but the Community Art and Design Advisory Committee and our staff reviews the condition of all of our bronze and all of our sculpture annually to make recommendations for improvement or repair. It was pre-COVID that we got an estimate that was very similar to what Parks and Rec had for some repair and restoration on that piece, but then we found out there was plans being discussed for a renovation and that there were funds available for care and restoration. With that being said, in terms of some annual care and maintenance, or at least periodically, the Community Art and Design Advisory Committee makes recommendations to staff and the Arts Commission about the prioritization of which pieces to take care of first. Our current budget that we have would only do that sculpture annually. So we have put in a request for a little bit more because we have some other deferred maintenance. But in terms of the evaluation and working with parks, we'd be happy to be a partner with that to find the most cost-effective ways possible. Currently, volunteers, clean and care for some pieces. They don't wax all of the smaller pieces every year, but they do clean and care for them and inspect them on an annual basis.
Okay.
Also, I'd like to mention that the estimated annual cleaning, when I spoke to the Wichita, they have a board that oversees their Veterans Park, and they have a lot of memorials up there, if you've visited before, and they said that they do it on an as-needed basis. So to me, that's probably the most cost-effective way to move forward, is to just determine if it's needed, and that's how, like, other cities, Manhattan and so forth, Junction City, do it as well.
I think it'd be worth mentioning the history here. John's father, John Smuts, who recently passed, and my father, D. Longbine, were also part of the original 1992 committee that built the memorial. So I'm all for taking care of it.
Thank you.
On the lighting project, would that need to be, I'm not sure what that entails, would that need to be synchronized with the restoration and construction, or would that?
Yeah, I presume that the expansion of this project has the net effect of expanding the lighting project as well, so we would certainly need to coordinate those.
Yeah.
Back to the funding. When I first started visiting about this, and when this was presented to the Parks and Rec, that $335,000 was the original estimate. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe I told Stan, better put about 30% on top of that. Because it's just what we've seen with city
Sure.
projects and bids. It's incredible how much things have went up. And
That makes sense.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, any direction for city staff?
what are some of our options here?
Well, more broadly than this topic, I think we are starting to fall into a pattern of having requests come to the podium on a as catch as catch can basis, which puts you in an awkward position to make those kind of decisions. My suggestion would be that we need a more of a process to aggregate requests and bring them to you as part of our budget process, and then we can kind of balance options as you have multiple requests before you.
Well, I think get this out there, there'd be a lot of public support. And our dads did it previously, and it can be done again. But I do think they need to revise the estimates.
Well, I like the project and the improvements of it. I think we've got more time to work with it budget-wise than one annual budget. So I think they're a couple of years out from where this really starts to happen, and the monies haven't to be committed. So it's easy for me to say, so it's not a short timer here. But I'll say that I do like the project. I think the citizens of Salina will receive it well, and it will be well received across the state, given our history with the military. So,
If we were doing this ourselves, would this go through the CIP process, or would it come as a special budgeted line item through Parks and Recs in a typical year?
It would certainly go through the budget process as a significant CIP project. And when you say CIP process, you got, kind of the request process, then you have the ongoing budgeting process. I don't know that the annual expense of maintenance would go through that CIP process, but $350,000 to $500,000 expenditure would certainly come forward as part of the budget along with other requests that size.
Because that's something we'd be, I guess, well, you probably are already ramping up for,
we're
for the
getting
upcoming
started.
budget.
We have a sizable inventory, and we've been through that exercise before. You may recall, not that long ago, we had total requests that exceeded our annual budget. We had to pick our way through how we were going to solve those. So it feels like we're kind of headed in that direction again in terms of requests.
How would you handle something like this? Because it does sound like this would be probably a 2025 budget item instead of a 2024. Or would you budget for 2024 and carry it up over? How would you?
That'd probably be the safest means to, set aside funds or make a annual appropriation, but everything that we do is subject to annual renewal. So if there's any concern about, a multi-year commitment, we could enter into a funding agreement. We could set those funds aside. I think part of it's going to be you determining the percentage match or some matching format. I think we also probably need to get started on a cost estimate for lighting. If we're going to honor that commitment, that could easily add up pretty quickly.
Now, on the lighting, would the important thing be to have the wire in there so you've got the base available? If you want, it'd be optional up until the time you actually install your lighting fixtures.
I think given how detailed their plan is, it probably wouldn't be that hard to select light fixtures and come up with a pretty dialed-in design that syncs up with their expanded footprint. But we need to do that sooner rather than later to get those cost estimates prepared.
Well, it is in the Parks Master Plan, and we have moved things around there a time or two. So.
And the lighting is, at least,
Yeah, and I guess that would be a question. I see some individuals out here that I think are involved in the, Mr. Ediger and stuff, with the design. I guess, are they aware of what our lighting requests were, or what we were looking to do? And is part of their 300 and some thousand included our lighting?
And I'll quickly defer to Jeff, but I would expect that the level of detail of our lighting plan is that reference in the Park Master Plan. Until we get further down that path, we don't have a whole lot more detail than that. Now, whether it's included in their numbers, I don't know.
That is correct. Including the numbers of their...
Yeah, their project cost estimate.
I don't believe that it is part of their $335,000. As Mr. Scragg mentioned, it is just a line right now. We have not done a lighting design. And then, as Mr. Scragg also said, they're expanding the site. Just to clarify, there is lighting available in the park. It's not dark at night. However, we're looking at expanding that for their future.
I guess what I was getting at, I didn't know if they already had a lighting feature included, so we were doubling up, or if that was our lighting was in addition to.
I think that we would be able to...
Could you please come to the microphone? I'm sorry, so the public can hear.
As far as our lighting, it would be electrical brought to the two new monuments, which are the seating, and we would probably have LED around it so it would glow on the sidewalk at night, and we could easily handle that if we just had electricity brought to that. We could pay for all of that, so that would not have to be an issue. So, and the other thing that, if there's going to be electrical done, probably should have an outlet brought closer to the original monument, so they don't have to run extension cords when they plug in microphones. And I mean, it'd be a good time to upgrade electrical in the park anyway. And we would be able to, if we just had a line brought up inside of our benches, then we would be able to handle taking care of that. When we're going to drill through the concrete and have access holes for wiring and all of that. So we'll probably look at some of the downtown lighting that they've done and look at some of the similar fixtures to add to that. So, but I would say we would be able to handle that portion of it.
Sounds like there's a lot of questions as to how this all comes together.
Yeah,
so.
and
Sure.
I think your description, if you're familiar with the lights in the downtown, the street markers have LED lighting underneath them that's downcast. But I think we also need to look at pedestrian lighting, whether there's need for lighting the pathway itself.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That timeline, 18 months to 2 years, was that to get the funds in place and start the project?
Yes, that's accurate. We would start fundraising as soon as, because we haven't kicked off. because as I mentioned, this is obviously proposed, and we would still like the opportunity to sell the granite sponsorship panels, and I'm not quite sure how to navigate that and like what the process is, but if that would be approved by you. But as soon as we had some other things approved, we would like to kick off the fundraising, and a goal, as I mentioned, would be 18 months to 2 years to accomplish.
Would that fall under our naming rights guidelines?
That's a really
Which
good
you
question.
said you're not quite sure how to do that. I was looking-
Right. We will certainly pick through that. I'm confident that we can accommodate it. The only thing that really gets my attention is the recognition of the sponsors, which is fine. We just need to make sure that we're taking into account whatever the policy provisions are.
Let me go ahead and show this. This is a approximate size.
You come up here.
We need you to come up here so that
Yeah, so
people
sit here,
listening
right
on
here.
air can hear also. Thank you.
And this is approximate size of the panels that would be in the octagon benches. This is about September 11th on this one here, and we leave space at the bottom for sponsorship down here. So, thought maybe you'd like to see that. That's what we'd like to get approved if we could. We would generate $5,000 for each one of the 16, which somewhere around $80,000, which would sure help us out. And then the concrete is being done in Missouri. It's being done in 8 sections, and they will be then brought to Salina and put together into an octagon. And then the framework will be done, all of that. So in order to get started on doing all of this and getting our measurements, we need $20,000 to get started, and we're up to about $5,000 right now. So then we can get to work on this, the rest of this project.
But from staff and legal's perspective, we can certainly outline what needs to be in place in the way of agreements and approvals in light of what's been described.
Anything else from us?
If there's concurrence to continue to work with them, we can put together an outline. We can prepare to have this a little bit further along for your considerations at budget time, and put that before you so that you can make an informed decision.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Sounds like a go.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we will be back in this room at 4 o'clock for our regular scheduled meeting. Okay, it is 4 o'clock. I will call the April 10th Salina City Commission meeting to order. I would look to staff and ask if confirmation that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. May we have a roll call?
Mayor Hoppick.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Lankowitz. Commissioner Longbine.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Would those who are able please stand for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, with that, we will move to awards and proclamations.
Item 3.1, recognition of the month of April 2023 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in the city of Salina. Angie White, sexual assault advocate at DVAC, will read the proclamation.
All right. To the people of Salina, Kansas, greetings. Whereas sexual violence is a widespread, preventable public health problem in Kansas, and whereas sexual violence is any sexual act that is perpetrated against someone's will, which includes sexual assault, rape, unwanted touching, threatened sexual violence, and verbal sexual harassment, and all types of sexual violence involve victims who do not consent or who are unable to consent or who refuse to allow the act. And whereas 1 in 3 women and nearly 1 in 6 men experience some form of sexual contact violence in their lifetime. And whereas in 2021, 1 incident of rape was reported to Kansas law enforcement every 7 hours, 19 minutes, and 6 seconds. And whereas these statistics do not represent the true prevalence of sexual violence due to underreporting, and sex offenders often target people they perceive as vulnerable, less powerful, and less credible. And whereas the offender is known to the victim in the vast majority of cases, 78% in Kansas, and whereas the effects of sexual violence may be felt directly after or for many months or years later, and confusion, anger, sadness, shame, guilt, helplessness, hopelessness, and self-blame are all common reactions to sexual violence. And whereas the Domestic Violence Association across Central Kansas, also known as DVAC, provides 24/7, 365 free confidential services to victims of sexual violence in the city of Salina, Kansas. And whereas DVAC advocates are available 24/7 at 785-827-5862, or toll free at 1-800-874-1499. Now therefore, Mike Hoppick, Mayor of Salina, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2023 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in the city of Salina, Kansas, and urge citizens to participate in the observance dated this 10th day of April.
Thank you, Angie.
You're welcome.
I guess I would ask a couple things. One, if you have any special activities scheduled
Yes.
this month, and also if you could just give us a little update on, or kind of the educational and support programs that you maybe have available.
Okay. Last Friday, we did Speak Night at Astra, and so we had some victims come forward, survivors read different poems and stuff on how it's affected their life with the sexual violence. Tonight, we're doing the candlelight vigil at Kansas Wesleyan University in front of the waterfalls there. And then throughout the rest of the month, we're doing stuff at the colleges and around town. Yeah, sexual assault is, as we all know, very, very wide. At DVAC, people who call if they need assistance with that, we can help with PFAs, protection from stalking orders as well. We go to court with them. We're right by their side through the whole process. And we do get several calls.
Okay. We thank you very much, and we wish we did not have a need for DVAC,
Right.
but since we do, we appreciate the work you and your group does. So
Yes,
if you come
thank you.
forward, I have a proclamation for you.
Thank you for supporting us.
Yes. Okay, that will lead us to item 3.2.
Item 3.2, recognition of the month of April 2023 as Fair Housing Month in the City of Salina. Marissa Patton, Community Relations Specialist at the City of Salina, will read the proclamation.
Good afternoon. Whereas April 2023 marks the 55th anniversary of the passage of the Fair Housing Act, which prohibits discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of homes, and whereas the Act enunciates a national policy of fair housing for all who live in the United States without regard to race, color, religion, national origin, sex, familial status, or disability, and whereas the City of Salina is committed to the missions and intention of Congress to provide fair and equal housing opportunities for all citizens. The principle of fair housing is not only national law and policy, but is enforced locally under Chapter 13 of Salina City Code. And whereas we celebrate the strides that we have been made to remove barriers to fair housing and acknowledge the acts of housing discrimination as repugnant to a common sense of decency and fairness, and recognize that as a city and a nation, we still have much work to do. Now therefore, my Coppic, Mayor of the City of Salina, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2023 Fair Housing Month and encourage the people of Salina to learn more about their rights and responsibilities under the Fair Housing Act and the Kansas Residential Landlord-Tenant Act as we collectively fight housing discrimination within our community.
Thank you. And I'm going to look at city staff, and I think we're one of the few communities, maybe in Kansas, that has a community relations department even. Is that correct?
It is. In fact, you may know better than I have.
Yes.
I didn't want to put you on the spot. That's why I looked at him.
So our department, the Community Relations, is one of two fair housing assistant programs in the state of Kansas.
So,
Hutchinson being the other one?
Lawrence.
Okay.
so I think
Yep.
that speaks to Salina's understanding of the importance of that. Could you give us a little just update on kind of how you deal with the public on some of these housing issues?
Yeah, so if somebody feels like they are feeling discriminated, it is mine and the other specialist, Spencer Ingram Manson's responsibility to take time and interview them. And if there is concern that there is discrimination, we will investigate and work as a third party and kind of in replace of HUD as their equal opportunity specialists, and go through a full investigation and write a report for our Human Relations Commission, a city board, to decide whether or not there's probable cause to move forward in court.
Great. Well, thank you very much for being here. Come forward. I have Okay, that will lead us to item 3.3.
Item 3.3, presentation of the POW MIA plaque to the City of Salina.
Okay. And please give your name, if you would, please.
I am Steve Murison, the current commander of the VFW Post 1432. And proclamation, POW MIA City recognition. Whereas the City of Salina in the state of Kansas remains resolute that no American serviceman or servicewoman who can be recovered shall be knowingly left behind on the field of battle. And whereas the City of Salina holds with highest regard the sacrifices made by all American prisoners of war who surrendered their freedom and endured great hardships in the defense of American liberties and values. And whereas on the date of this printing, the number of American missing in action from all U.S. wars stands at 81,468. And whereas the people of the City of Salina hold dear the sacrifice of all American servicemen and women who have given their lives with specific attention by this proclamation to those whose whereabouts still remain unknown. And whereas the City of Salina recognizes the POWMI flag designed by Newt Heisley in 1972 as a symbol of our nation's concern and commitment to resolving as fully as possible the fates of Americans still prisoner, missing, and unaccounted for from all U.S. wars, thus ending the uncertainty for their families and the nations by finally providing closure. And whereas the homes and businesses of the City of Salina are encouraged to display the POWMIA flag when practical and appropriate in conjunction with the flag of the United States, and whereas the citizens of the City of Salina with somber appreciation extend their gratitude to all POWMI family members who continue to carry the burden of their personal loss and offer encouragements that the fate and location of their missing loved ones will be made known again. Now, therefore, by the majority consent of the Jefferson Barracks POWMIA Museum Board of Directors, does hereby proclaim the City of Salina as a POWMIA city, and encourages the citizens of the City of Salina to continue showing their appreciation for the sacrifices made by our nation's POWs and MIAs, along with their families, in the defense of American liberties and values. In witness whereof, this 14th day of March, 2023, Paul Dillon, President of the Jefferson Barracks POWMIA Museum.
Thank you, Steve. Would you maybe just like to expand a little bit on what that means to the city to become a POWMI city, and a little bit about how you went about getting this for us?
Okay. What we did was, what it means is we were the second city in the state of Kansas to be recognized as a POWMI city. Manhattan is the other location. And what we had to do for this is, well, first is to get the City of Salina, which had already done, I think with the help of some other veterans, has put up the POWMI flag, been displayed around on the city. Then once we did that, came before the city, and Mayor, you and the other commissioners approved Salina to be a POWMI city. So we presented that to the Jefferson Barracks Board of Directors. They went through and considered what, things that we would do and the things that we've done. And based on that information, they declared us a POWMI city.
Okay. And I believe you have a POW plaque?
I have a plaque, a sign, and also the proclamation.
Okay, I will come down there since that sign is that size. Thank you for. I've got one more. Okay. Thank you, guys. And I'm going to ask you where you're going to place that.
Well, this is actually to be placed somewhere where the city, to be displayed around somewhere around the city county building.
Okay, perfect. Let you hand it over to the. For those that may not have been able to hear, Ms. Murison stated that the plaque will be placed somewhere around the city county building. So appreciate your work on getting that done for us, gentlemen.
This all happened in record speed.
Yeah.
I wish most city business could happen that quick.
Yeah, I think it was over about 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. That will lead us to item 4.1.
Item 4.1, conduct a public hearing on the advisability of the issuance of taxable industrial revenue bonds for Beck's Superior Hybrids of Atlanta.
Okay, due to a conflict of interest, I will turn this portion over to Vice Mayor Longbine.
Thank you. Mitch Robinson, will open the public hearing?
I can address this. We originally had this scheduled for a hearing of the IRB, if you remembered, from several weeks ago to issue IRBs for Beck's seed. After we had the meeting scheduled for today and had it properly noticed up, it turns out that they were able to tentatively negotiate purchase of some additional land. This land has not been finalized, and it may very well require additional rezoning. If you recall, we did rezoning when we initially talked about this. So what we were asking today is to go ahead and go forward, since we already had the public hearing scheduled. Go ahead and open it up, see if there's any comments, close it, and then we'll bring this back to the City Commission once we have more definitive dates after they've been able to close the sale of the property and the other additional steps that are needed. We can't really go forward with that until we have those definitive dates.
Okay. Can we go forward with just 3 commissioners here is my question.
Yes, you've got a quorum and you're able to conduct business. In this particular instance, you really just need to open and close the meeting. I don't know if there's any additional action needed, so that helps all the more.
Okay.
Just ask one other question. Would there be expectation of any information gathered subsequent to the hearing that would normally be open to discussion during a public hearing?
Well, yeah, this is like we're going to start over again. Essentially, because it was noticed up, and this occurs every now and then with the Planning Commission or other matters, but once we publish notice, we have an obligation. Someone may read that and either tune in or show up at a meeting expecting that we're going to take up the business that was advertised. So we don't have the ability at the staff level to remove it from your agenda. We need to open the hearing, close the hearing. Once they finalize the details of their project, that may create a refinement in the IRB request. We'll work up a notice again. We'll conduct another public hearing, and we'll take it from the top.
So we are not going to take any action today?
No, I think there is a motion instructing us to proceed with the necessary preparations and bring back a new public hearing. But essentially, you're opening and closing the hearing today, and we'll bring this back when it's
Any other
ready to go.
comments? Nope. Any comments from the public? We will close the public hearing. And
Do we want to be on record with a motion then?
You're welcome to.
Mayor, I move or Vice Mayor, I move we approve a motion instructing staff to proceed with the necessary preparation for the City Commission to consider industrial revenue bond financing for Beck's Superior Hybrids of Atlanta, and direct staff to bring a new public hearing date to the City Commission once the additional land sale has been completed.
Second.
okay, we got a motion and a second. To approve a motion instructing staff to proceed with the necessary preparation for the City Commission to consider industrial revenue bond financing for Beck's Superior Hybrids of Atlanta, Indiana, and direct staff to bring a new public hearing date to the City Commission once the additional land sale has been completed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Now we will close the public hearing and welcome the mayor back.
Okay, thank you. That will lead us to consent agenda.
Item 5.1, approve the minutes of the special meeting of April 3, 2023. Item 5.2, approve the minutes of the regular meeting of April 3, 2023. Item 5.3, authorize the city manager to sign a request from the Kansas Department of Transportation to exchange 2023 federal funds per the KDOT master agreement governing the annual use thereof. Item 5.4, award the bid for project number 23017, 2023 Major Concrete to Smoky Hill LLC of Salina in the amount of $507,989.70 with a 5% construction contingency for a total project authorization not to exceed $533,389.19, and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Smoky Hill LLC of Salina upon fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents.
Okay, do we have an item that a commissioner would like to have removed from the consent agenda?
Nope.
Mayor, I move we approve the consent agenda as presented by the clerk.
Second.
We have a motion, and a second, to approve consent agenda items 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, and 5.4. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. That will lead us into administration, item 6.1.
Item 6.1, Schneider Electric Investment Grade Facility Audit Update.
Okay, I'm going to look at Mr. Wood, and before we get started, I'm going to thank Schneider Electric for their patience. I think we've put them off several times. Weren't avoiding you on purpose, but we had some items that we had to move forward. So
I was sick on one of them, so I'll follow the sword as well.
Well, good. It worked out for both.
Yeah, it worked out for everybody.
I will. Jacob, do you have some comments you would like to make?
Yeah, I'll just provide a brief introduction here. So Schneider Electric is an energy company that we entered into an agreement with, it's been 6 or 8 months now, to do an investment grade audit. Basically, what we wanted them to do is come in and look at our facilities. We've recognized over time that we have some deferred maintenance on our facilities, things like HVACs, windows, that sort of thing. So we asked Schneider to come in and take a look at those things. They have done that. They've been working through that process. We've got a brief presentation that we'll throw up and have them walk through. This is Peter Hinkle. He's kind of the project lead that I've been working with, and then Dan Moffett works for him, or with him. I don't know if it's for him, but with him at Schneider Electric. He's an engineer that's been working with our facility staff and just going through everything kind of with a fine-tooth comb. So with that, I will throw a presentation up and we will buzz through it. This was going to be one of the, like a record short meeting, but.
Commissioners, for your benefit, this was intended to be a study session, but we kept moving them out, so we kind of have a study session level presentation on your regular agenda.
Yeah, and actually, this is a good time for this to happen with the strategic planning discussions that we've had. Certainly we've been looking kind of at the long range. What do we have with the funds that we have? So this is a good time to actually interject this into the conversation. So with that, Peter, you can take it away.
Thank you, Jacob, and thank you, Commissioners, for allowing us to come here today. We really do appreciate the time, and really the goal of what we're going to be discussing is kind of a conceptual thought, right? When we first entered into this agreement, it does take time for our team from an engineering perspective to work with your staff, Troy and Gary, Parks and Recs Department, really everybody we've worked with has been very cordial in helping us to understand the challenges and really what we've been doing over the past few months and will continue to do over the next couple of months as well is kind of figuring out from a solutions perspective what's the right approach, what's the right balance on a given building, facility, or piece of infrastructure. And so today, kind of the goal will be to introduce the concept, just because I know that we went through a selection process, but just kind of want to reiterate how we operate so that you guys can have a little bit deeper understanding, discuss the time frame and then the scopes of work, the savings mechanism, and kind of the next steps of what you'll hear from us or potentially see here come middle part of the summer of this year. So, Jacob. So just to kind of give you an understanding of what we do, I kind of refer to it as the design, build, performance model. So our job is really to come in here and to try to understand how are your buildings operating today and what kind of impact can we make on them moving forward from subtle changes to complete overhauls of how the HVAC and mechanical systems operate. And so from that, we then guarantee a level of dollars. So when you kind of see how the before and after work, we come in and we say, hey, we're going to save you, and I'll just use some round figures, $100,000 a year. And so our goal is to come in and then each year to be able to hit that with you to kind of help it so from a budgetary perspective, you're not out any additional funds or you're not seeing a shortfall. And if we do, we write a check for the difference. One of the first jobs I did was a little tiny school district, and it was about a $1,000 check on a $100,000 guarantee, and they looked at me like, we figured this would be a rounding error. So they were shocked that we were even willing to kind of stand behind the work. And in the next year, we actually hit about 10% above their guarantee, and they were able to recoup those savings. And so when we talk about what we're trying to accomplish, it's far beyond just the scopes of work and the impact there. It's really about how are these buildings moving forward and performing, and that also incorporates the comfort level of these spaces. And so kind of when you look at the value proposition that we bring, that 19.3% is what we've seen in your facilities and in the buildings that we're including in this project to date as far as a reduction in energy cost and energy usage. We look at this from a one partner, so it's Schneider Electric who is responsible for the entire process, and then we actually guarantee and oversee that. And then the piece that Jacob mentioned, which is kind of in tune with your strategic planning process, is like most cities, you have far greater need than dollars. And so it's how do we kind of strategically look at how to invest, and we'll get to kind of what that means, especially on the mechanical side here in just a few minutes, for not just today's project that we've started to develop, but also future phases of work over the next 5 to 10 years that I think you can kind of start to plan for and kind of be able to provide a future in terms of those phases and scopes and needs. So, yeah, thanks. So an eye test, if you can read that for me, that would be great. But just to give you a sense, Jacob mentioned kind of that orange of the selection process. And really since about September is when we kicked off the audits. And ever since September of last year, we've really been working with staff to develop and design and really understand. We're building what's called kind of eQuest models. So we're actually taking your facilities, putting them into a computer simulation and saying, okay, how is this building operating? Why is it at $1.50 a square foot? And if we change the mechanical systems, or we change the lighting or the controls or the building envelope, or just how that building functions to begin with, what kind of impact can we have on your dollars and cents from a budgetary perspective? And so that's really what we've been doing over the past several months of working with staff and working with those folks who physically maintain those buildings to really understand the operations. And so when you look at kind of the dates, and I'll fall on the sword for being sick the last time, or these dates would actually perfectly align. But we're kind of a month behind, I guess you'd say, in terms of April and March timeframe. But we're really starting to finish up a lot of the development side and really starting to get into more of the bidding process. So that'll happen over the next few months. We actually met with Troy and with Gary this afternoon to go through some technical aspects of the project. So again, this is all conceptual, and so as we're going through it, we want to get their buy-in and get their understanding. But with the end goal being by about a June, July timeframe, being able to come back to the commission and saying, hey, this is the scopes, this is the value, this is the savings, and also this is how we're going to pay for it as well, which is kind of another thing that we're working on with the administration over the next few months, just trying to develop that approach. So kind of diving into the scopes of work, and I'll kind of hand this over to Dan. You want to go to the next slide? The conceptual process that we go through and just what we've audited. So we've seen a number of facilities. In fact, I think our original list was almost 100 long, and we narrowed that down. Some of your buildings, we just want to be honest with you, looking at a small shed that has no heating, cooling, and one light bulb, probably not the best use of our time or your money. So we said, hey, that's something that I think we can tackle without including in this process. But really the larger facilities that you own and operate, and really a number of those buildings that we looked at are really what we're going to be talking about today in terms of scope. But we looked at everything as you kind of look at that list from LED lighting and controls all the way down to very specific issues, and probably the most notable one that we'll dive into from a technical perspective is tackling some of the challenges from a costing at Kenwood Cove. And we'll again get to that in just a moment. But again, as we looked at this, we started to identify kind of your baseline and what you're spending, which from a utility perspective, the city spends approximately $900,000 or so a year on gas, water, electric, those kind of things from a utilities perspective. And that's really what we're focused on in terms of trying to lower down those costs. The other big piece of this that you'll note is that utilities rates and incentives. So one of the ways we're looking to pay for this, or multiple ways, is a bunch of utility incentives through 179D, as well as opportunities through some historical tax credits with Smoky Hill. And so there's some great opportunities that, again, we'll kind of dive into here as we get into those scopes. You can go to the next slide. So I'm going to turn over to Dan Moffitt, and Dan Moffitt's our project development manager. He'll kind of give you the highlights on scope. And
yeah. So some of the scopes are more energy focused and some are more capital focused. Certainly lighting is one that has a great payback and helps the city. LED lighting, you probably have heard a lot about already and maybe used personally, and it reduces the lighting energy use by over half and is definitely well worth it. So the focus of this, and this is the one where we're applying it the broadest into about 25 different city buildings, is to convert whatever lighting hasn't been already converted to LED and see significant savings. And a lot of it will be fairly invisible to the users. You take like your lighting here, for example, you really can't see the lighting behind the lenses here anyway. And so a lot of the end users won't really notice that. They'll just have the benefit of the reduced energy use. There's a few cases, like in some places with high bay fixtures, like in a fire station or external fixtures on the building where they may have some new fixtures. But most of it will be pretty invisible. And again, the focus is energy savings for the lighting. And we can go on to the next. Building automation, you have some building automation of controls primarily for your HVAC systems in your larger buildings. Right now you have a mixture of older systems, and the goal here is to not only bring systems up to a new functional system that your maintenance department can use to troubleshoot and oversee the HVAC systems in the buildings, but also to hopefully tie those together in one consistent system so they can use those more effectively. And the focus in different buildings just depends on the age and the extent of the system already in that. So just here it gives kind of an idea of the different buildings that we're focused on for doing controls. And we can go ahead and go on to the next. Related to envelope, one of the main things we're looking at is upgrading the windows at Smoky Hill. About 25 years ago, a lot of the windows were upgraded, and in those windows particularly, about 30% of those have lost their seals and are cloudy. You might not notice that unless you're up close to it, but it's time to replace the glass in those. We can reuse the frame, but replace the glass in those. And then there were about 17 or 18 fixtures at that time that weren't updated, have a similar look, but you can tell one example, and that's probably one of the worst there on the lower right. But part of this is to also go ahead and do those and bring those up to the same type of windows to match the existing. And I don't know if you wanted to say something about the tax credit.
Kind of the one thing with the historical tax credit, and something that kind of interesting that came out of our conversations with Troy today. So that building in particular, it's on a national registration of historical sites, and so that opens up to a lot of great opportunities, knowing that you're a government but that doesn't pay taxes, right? What we'll do is we'll work with the Kansas Department, the Kansas Historical Society Department, and make sure that we get all the documentation over to them. They then give the tax credit to you all, and then we work to sell that to a bank or a local, hopefully a local financier that will help buy those tax credits. But there is a fairly lucrative market from what we're learning about in terms of that opportunity, and it pays, I believe it's up to 30%. 30% of the upfront cost can be used for those tax credits. And so that's just another valuable effort. And one of the things talking with Troy is it impacts all envelope. And so kind of the concept with these tax credits is, not just our scopes, but also Troy's looking, I think we're looking at a roof replacement on that facility sometime over the next year or so. And so we discuss, hey, why don't we just look at this as kind of a combined, not necessarily doing the roof within Schneider, but combined application with the Kansas State Department, and just saying, hey, let's go ahead and look at this so that you guys can maximize the benefit and the value from a revenue, if you will, or a funding mechanism, if you will, perspective. And so this is just a great example of some of those things, and really the beautiful part about our conversation with them is essentially anything that's going to keep that building around is kind of, as they mentioned, is something we should look to apply for. So we'll definitely work with them and make sure you get and maximize those to the greatest value.
Explain that again, how a government agency receives tax credits.
So there's a group of banks that want to buy these tax credits. Usually it's anywhere between 70 and 90 cents on the dollar, but they leverage it then within their own portfolio like they do anything else, and they buy that off of the government agency, and it's one of those things, again, we've got to work through the process with the state, but it's not uncommon, and it sounds like it's something that can be fairly lucrative to a city who's doing these types of projects.
And then it comes back to the city from the bank.
Exactly. Yeah, they basically pay the city for the rights to claim those credits on their own taxes.
So the way that process would work is if we were awarded the tax credits, so let's say that it was $100,000, then we would do an RFP saying that we have $100,000 worth of tax credits, and then those banks, they would bid on those, and maybe they probably wouldn't pay us a whole $100,000, but they may pay us $90,000. And so they would buy the tax credits from us, and we would have the cash to be able to put into the project.
Talking with the people at the State Historical Society, if we can find even local banks, because they're much more willing to want to keep their tax dollars here local, it makes it that much more of a better story. So once we get the application in, they'll give us kind of a list of folks who have purchased in the past, and then we'll work with Jacob and the administration to make sure that we're following kind of the process that they've outlined for us already, just to make sure you can secure those funds. Dan?
Okay, and just finishing up on this, one of the scopes we've added kind of later in the project relates to upgrading insulation. A lot of that the focus is on maintenance facilities, But also one building that has some real insulation needs is T-Peck Arena. So we're kind of evaluating that and trying to get our arms around exactly what that would cost and whether it makes sense to try to include in the project or not. But that's one of the areas we're looking at. We can go ahead and go on to the next. Kenwood Cove is an interesting situation there. As you're aware, that facility is just open during the summer months. But due to a very interesting utility rate schedule, it falls right on a line of being in a demand-heavy rate that basically causes you to have to pay for a minimum amount of electrical use all year round, even though you're not using it. So what that results in is $4,000 to $5,000 a month for 9 months you're not using the facility. And so our focus has been to reduce the demand below a certain threshold, 300 kW, so that you can go down to a different rate that doesn't have that penalty all through the year. And so we've really identified two scopes that we're focused on. One has to do with solar energy, which would reduce the amount you're using and has the benefit, too, of those 9 months when you're not open, we can resell that to the utility. And then also you have some large electric domestic hot water heaters serving the bathhouse that have a pretty high demand associated with them. And we're looking to convert those to gas so that you automatically have a much lower usage of electricity especially during those peak hours. So it's toward the end of the day when people are leaving the pool and you have a lot of use. So that's kind of what we're doing there at Kenwood Cove.
One kind of thing to note here is you'll see at the bottom the IRA, which is the Inflationary Reduction Act. Currently, that process that is available, it used to be a tax credit for mainly private entities, and now they've opened it up as basically kind of a buy down, if you will, for government agencies to use. So it's about 30 to 40% buy down on the solar piece of this project. So once we get kind of final pricing, and again, it's go through an application process, submit documentation, but you'll get between 30 to 40%, and the reason there's a delta is there's certain Buy American, different clauses, different locations of where we would put it, as the federal government does. They don't make anything too easy for us to go after, but we're looking at that as another way, another funding mechanism to help buy down the cost of the project and then be able to put that towards. And you'll see as we get kind of towards the end of the project what our estimate looks like at this point for that line item. But again, it's conceptual, so a lot of these numbers will change. But just want to give you a heads up that we're not just looking at a debt service or anything like that at this point. It's one of those things we're really looking at a number of different avenues to help fund the project and to fund the needs within the city.
Would that be a similar tax credit process like you just explained earlier?
No, the IRA money is actually a direct allocation from the federal government. It's an application that you have to put in, and then you get the 30-40% as a buy down of the cost associated with implementing the solar or renewable technology.
Quick question on the Kenwood Cove. Do we have gas to that building, to that facility?
We do to certain parts of that site, but we will actually have to work with Kansas Gas Service to bring new gas and probably bring it from the south, like from the YMCA area, up to the bathhouse.
So when we have to do something like that, that expense is all included in this when
Yes.
we look for the, okay.
There will be, and they said probably about an $8,000 upfront cost. Sometimes they just spread that into all of your bills, but because you're only open during the summer, they may have that amount of money.
Yeah.
And we'll work out with the city how they want to cover that.
Yeah, I guess that was just my question. If we don't have certain utilities or something into a building, how that's handled in the analysis, so.
Right, yeah,
okay.
you don't want to be surprised with an extra cost.
We definitely don't want to sell something that's gas and have no gas to it. That's also another challenge, right?
Back to your solar panels, could that energy be shifted over to Tony's Pizza Center? Does that look at?
Indirectly, the electricity that's not being used, like during the winter months, for example, is going back into the utility to use wherever. So directly to use it over at T-Peck would involve some expense. It's probably not worth it, just getting it over to that service. And it add a degree of complication too. So yeah, they're close. But we actually
not
looked
that close,
at that.
huh?
Yeah,
and also Evergy typically limits it on a meter by meter basis, so that can be another challenge since they're separately metered entities. Doing a switch, I would hate to tell you, they probably would say that's not going to happen. I mean, they have the right to tell us, I guess, that, but it's certainly something we could look into. I'll just like Dan's saying, it might not be worth the engineering effort once we even have that conversation with Evergy of whether or not they'd even be open to the idea. Because I think we did at least bring this up as a topic, knowing that they are, if you look at kind of where that triangle is, you'll see TPEC's parking lot is essentially right there, kind of in the upper right-hand corner. So it's something that's come up.
Yeah, that, I guess just to clarify that too, where that triangle is kind of representing about how much area would be needed for the solar panels. So it's not a large amount. Yeah, and as to his point of regarding TPEC also, Evergy has a limit on how much solar they will do net metering on to buy back, and that's 100 kW, which is essentially almost all of what we're using right there at Kenwood Cove. So there's a lot that could be done at TPEC, but it's larger than what they would even allow to be bought back anyway. So of course TPEC could possibly use it all year round. So we did look at that, but decided this is what made sense so far. Go ahead and go on to the next. And just regarding mechanical systems, this is really one of the main focuses, one of the main needs. You have equipment throughout the city. I think what did we come up with, about 123 units in the buildings we were looking at alone. And our focus is to replace a lot of the older equipment, and in some cases try to modify the design a little bit to be more useful to the facilities. So just here listed is the main buildings that we're looking at: Smoky Hill, TPEC, the courts, animal shelters, the fire stations, and the Friendship Center. And again, most of that is based on just older equipment that really needs to be replaced, and in some cases trying to correct some situations where they're not being able to function properly. So
yeah, if you kind of look at the HVAC units by age, so we tried to identify what we're working with Troy and Gary, what are the biggest needs in terms of the problem child, right? Like which ones are having the most issues, you're spending the most amount of time on, or in some cases the most amount of outside resources coming in to help and support. And so if you go to the next slide, it actually kind of shows it even better. So this kind of gives you a sense, blue being what's number of existing units, red being the ones that we'll replace. But it kind of gives you an idea of what's that look like for you all long term. We wouldn't recommend replacing a unit that's 10 years old unless there's a significant reason to do so. And so when we started to look at this and working with Jacob, it's once we kind of get through this phase of work, we can start to define, because you'll see there's a pretty good gap from about 2005-ish to around the start of 2009, 2010 in terms of where units and age and replacement really starts to become a problem. So you're really looking at that 2029 kind of a time frame to kind of reinvigorate this kind of a process. The only units that we didn't include that were significantly old, which you'll probably notice that pre-2001 has a little bit of a gap there, those are actually over at the Arts Center. There's also a small mini split unit at the community theater. But that art center is going under a renovation, and so that's one of the things we kind of pulled from scope as we've kind of started to develop, just because it doesn't make sense to have two projects going on there at the same time. But the rest of the units that, again, are of age or based upon what we're hearing from staff that need to be replaced, those are all included in this phase. And then as we kind of wrap up, we'll give you kind of an idea of, okay, what's the time frame for maybe another block of units that you all can start planning for 5, 10, 15 years down the line. Next slide. You want to get any detail?
Yeah, just I guess a little more detail on a couple of the main facilities. There at Smoky Hill, you have basically 3 large units, one serving each floor, and we're looking at replacing each one of those. Those are over 25 years old. And then also the boxes that actually do the conditioning to each individual space as well, or that same time frame of age. And one of the focuses in this building really is humidity control. So that's been a special focus, is making sure we're maintaining the right conditions for the artifacts in that facility. So we're not really changing the use of the space or the zoning of the space, but making sure that we have the right equipment there that can keep the conditions where they need to be for that museum space. And then on the TPEC Arena, we're really focusing mostly on the arena, and we've been focusing on the units that serve the east end of the arena. Have come to find out in the process in the last couple of months that there's also some issues with the west side and a unit that's only partially functioning on the north side. So we're in the process of evaluating all that, and we'll just bring back the results of that and see how much of that the city feels like they want to try to do in a project like this.
Weren't all those units replaced on that remodel recently?
The units that were replaced last year served the Heritage Hall or the Great
No, this
Plains.
was about 5 years ago.
Well, I think it was a little longer than, time flies, I think it was
Yeah.
longer than that, but I don't know.
There are two really large units, one on the north and one on the south, that were put in around 2015. And one of those is one that's partially out of service. It's about half capacity. And so we're looking at what we need to do to get that back up to full capacity. The units on the west end and the east end were about a little over 20 years old. So those are older. But yeah, you have so many pieces of equipment there that,
Yeah, I thought that was part of that $13 million renovation.
Yeah, and I don't know the date of that, but that was longer ago than 5 years, and I'd have to go back and look at the scope of that to see.
That was not in the scope. Okay.
Well, I'm not prepared to say that it wasn't, but I think the timing is such that it might be getting into some of the dates that he's referring to.
I don't know. That's,
about when the remodel took place?
That sounds about
I vividly remember it, but I don't remember the
so
date.
that would be the two large units, yeah.
Yeah, the north and the south units, so the south unit is 2015, that's what you're talking about,
Right.
that we're not replacing, that probably was replaced about that time frame. And then the north unit, it's a coil that's burst, essentially, or it's broken. And so we're gonna replace the coil rather than the whole unit,
Yeah.
which will get you the capacity back that you're currently losing within that unit specifically. And then on the east and the west side, those are the units that either aren't functioning at all, or we're trying to investigate as far as how we can get them functioning in the future. And that's really kind of the options we're gonna bring back, is to fix the coil, and then looking at replacement or fixing the issues on the east and west units.
Looks like 2012, 2013 timeframe.
Okay. Yeah, time flies. You can go on to the next one, I think. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess any questions on scope? I mean, I know we've kind of gone through that pretty quickly, but kind of the next piece is kind of the savings and kind of the pricing estimates that we started to put together. Go to the next slide. So this kind of gives you an idea when I talked a little bit about kind of building that baseline, and from an energy perspective, what we're trying to accomplish is saying, okay, what's the challenge in these facilities? But first we have to understand what's the operation of these facilities from a week to week, month to month, and even day to day aspect, so that we can start to build these models and then make the changes, whether that's lighting or controls or mechanical systems that then allow us to estimate what that savings will be that we can then guarantee. And so as of right now, you'll kind of see that baseline energy use and the savings percentage there on the left-hand column, and then the right-hand column is actually a cost savings percentage. And really the goal, if you kind of look at that dollars per square foot, that's the budget item. So we want to bring that down as low as possible. And so over the next several months, we'll be refining this as scopes kind of come and go or change, just to make sure that we're adapting the right savings principles to those scopes. And then the guarantee perspective, we'll work with administration and staff to kind of pull that together as well, as far as how we'll guarantee the savings exactly. But again, you'll kind of see those bottom notes, about 29 facilities and about $900,000 or so in expense. And so again, our goal, go to that next slide. Again, our goal will be to see that energy savings significantly reduced. So again, kind of a good eye chart, but just to give you a sense of how things kind of shook out. That $167,000, so that's on an annualized guarantee. And then the state statutes allows it to go up to 20 years. So I usually look at that as kind of a useful life of equipment, kind of a benchmark, if you will. And so over that 20 years, we're looking with a little bit of O&M cost savings, right around $5 million or so over that 20-year period. Again, as things go from conceptual to final design, these numbers might go up and down. The costs and the scopes, obviously, as they change, will impact the savings overall. But this kind of gives you a sense of how we're starting to put the project together at kind of this midterm level. The next slide. And then this last one is our conceptual pricing. Now, I'll say this about our pricing at this point. It is very conceptual. We still have to walk subcontractors, go through that process. We still have to go out to bid for final pieces of equipment and so forth, which we've actually already gotten some good local involvement through just initial conversations. I believe 2 out of the 3 bidders on the mechanical side that are interested are both local firms, so that'll be good. But as you kind of see these different line items, we kind of tried to match the actual annual savings with the physical improvements that are being made. Kind of the ones just to point out, obviously the Kenwood Cove piece, you'll see that incentive of $244,000 a year, so that's again based upon the IRA money. One thing we don't have in here is the historical tax credits. Those are something that really have kind of come to light over the past few weeks in working with the state to try to identify how and what we need to apply and if this project aligns with their expectations of what that program allows. But there's also other, obviously savings involved in terms of energy efficiency and the gains that were being made there. But again, these numbers are pretty preliminary, and as we go through this and scope changes, we'll try to point that out kind of in the July, June timeframe when we come back to the commission, just so you have an idea of kind of where we've come and where we'd be going from a construction perspective. Next slide. Kind of just to wrap up, and then I'll open up for any additional questions, but kind of over the next few months, what we'll be focused on is we'll work with staff to start to identify the funding mechanism. There's a lot of different moving parts there, obviously, from incentives to just how to fund in general, to dollars on hand, and what from a CIP perspective we could pull into this as well. We'll finalize contracts and really finalize the scope at the same time, and then again be prepared to come back to you all for approval here midsummer-ish. I'll knock on wood, as every best laid plan. We tried to be here in March, and here we are, middle of April. So if I wouldn't have gotten sick, I do apologize. So any questions, I guess, that you have for us, or anything from administration that Jacob or anyone wants to add, I'll also open that up as well.
So I'm assuming there is a cost to bring about these changes.
Yeah, if you go back one slide, yeah. The cost associated with the improvements is there at the sum of all scopes. Kind of gives you that bottom level.
Right. Now, where does that upfront money come from?
That's what we'll be working with Jacob on.
Yeah, so I mean, we do have some ARPA funds that are set aside. We also have, we have an allocation every year from our sales tax capital that goes towards facility maintenance, and then there is some savings that we may be able to take advantage of. So that's something that we have to figure out as we move forward to put a package together for how we are going to fund it. But most likely, we would bond this. This would be a debt finance project that we would bond over a 20-year time frame, as we would any large capital project.
So the added uniqueness to this approach is the guarantee. The column there, the sum of all scopes, the $7.3 million, is compared to the savings over that 20-year period. So if we bond finance, the premise is that we'd realize the savings to redirect what we're currently spending, at least to the 5.1 million level, back towards the payments, and we'd be able to upgrade the equipment.
Yeah, and we're also hoping that those historical tax credits will also take some additional funding, or additional chunk, if you will, out of that funding for you as well.
And we've done a similar approach with HVAC and I want to say lighting in the law enforcement center, and then the downtown decorative street lights. I think the added uniqueness with Schneider Electric is the guarantee aspect of it. In both of those instances, we financed them, had calculations like this that indicated anticipated savings, but there wasn't a follow-up mechanism, and there certainly wasn't a guarantee associated with it.
Yeah, one thing to speak towards the guarantee is as we're finalizing, the amount of savings at each building, we actually have a team that works. It's about 60 engineers across the country, and here locally in Kansas City and then out of Tulsa, we've got 3 individuals whose sole job it is to actually work with cities or municipalities or school districts to do 2 things. One, it's to see that guarantee through. So they're working with you to ensure that savings are being achieved both on a monthly basis and even a quarterly basis, and then an annualized kind of reconciliation period. But then in addition to that, they're also kind of your eyes and ears for your maintenance staff. So when you have trouble, getting something functioning, or it's cold in a space and they've kind of run the gamut of their tools to figure it out, our team can actually either remote in or come live and be on site to help troubleshoot some of those problems associated with the work that we've done. So it's kind of a nice double set of eyes, if you will, for your staff, both on the financing from a budgetary perspective, but then also with maintenance and operations to ensure they have some additional support, because they're always stretched very thin, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Is the guarantee based on units of energy consumed? Prices can go up, which would erode the saving.
Yeah, it's all based upon BTUs or KWH or KW. It's just like Kenwood Cove. I can't predict what the next set of rate increases will be from Evergy. Again, I'll knock on wood for everybody and myself who pays an Evergy bill. Let's hope it's nothing outlandish. But typically the way we operate is at about a 3% CPI. Just try to follow that annually to give you a sense of what that will look like, but it's always based upon the same units that we've reduced to calculate that savings out. That's a great question.
Hey, I also just want to mention, so as we've had this conversation with strategic planning last week, and we're going to continue that, we've talked about capacity and staff's capacity to manage these projects. I would say one of the benefits of having somebody like Schneider on board is this is a lot of projects. I mean, this is a lot of units being replaced, and having them kind of as the owner's rep that's going to manage those processes and manage the projects all the way through. It's more than what we could do internally with the staff that we have, on board right now. I mean, if we're lucky, Troy can manage one or two of these big projects a year just because, that's all the capacity he has to do that. He's great at it. He does a wonderful job. I don't want to minimize Troy at all. But having Schneider Electric be able to help manage those, I think will go a long ways in getting that stuff done.
And I would add that this analysis is timely in light of the strategic planning conversation, the budget conversation that we're having. In one particular slide, they noted that they're replacing 22 of 123 functioning HVAC units. Another piece of information for your reference is we currently insure 246 structures. And that's pump stations. That is possibly a shed with a light and not much more in it other than storage. But then there are other structures that don't merit being on our insurance. So when we talk about the universe of maintenance and the universe of things that might crop up, this is very strategic and it's very helpful, but we've got 246 plus buildings in our system.
So does this incorporate the other 50% of the HVAC units that aren't being replaced, that they are built into the model somehow to be replaced when they get more dated? And what about other, let's say we're 10 years in and windows are failing and thing.
So I think the answer to that question, if you look at the slide that I've just thrown up, I think this is probably the most telling slide in the entire deck here. I mean, this kind of has the ages of the HVAC systems that we have right now. We actually did a pretty good job. We were replacing 10 or 15 a year. One year we replaced over 20 units kind of in the 2009 to 2014, 15 timeframe. So we do a big project right now that will replace most of our really old units, and then 4 or 5 years from now we continue to go down this path, and maybe we'll have another project or be able to kind of streamline it and spend an average dollar every year replacing units the way that we did before. Yeah, the way that we've kind of had that discussion about vehicles and equipment, we'll have a little bit of time to figure out how we need to move forward, because those units really aren't going to age out for another 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point. I mean, if you just look at that 2009 as kind of your line in the sand from an equipment perspective, that's really kind of where the age. So 20 years from that, 2029, that's when you're going to have to start planning for, obviously you're going to have an emergency failure, something happens to a unit here or there, that's just kind of course of business. But in terms of large scale, looking at these systems, that's kind of the plan I would recommend, is to, within about 5 years, 2028, you're going to start needing to kind of think about, okay, what's the next iteration from a mechanical perspective that we need to replace or plan for replacement?
I got a few questions here. Where are you based out of?
Kansas City.
Okay. And is that the closest office to Salina?
What's that?
Are you the closest office, Schneider office?
Yes, we've got partners here in Wichita that are maybe the other close office, and then staff in Wichita. But our office, the closest office, would be out of Kansas City. Yeah.
Okay.
Lenexa, to give you an example.
I just learned that Schneider does a lot of industrial control security.
We're the biggest company nobody's ever heard of in some cases. Yeah, we're about a $35 billion a year firm, and
really?
Dan and I are about this big in terms of the grand scheme of things. We're about 500 people out of our massive company, and our goal is actually not equipment. It's just working with clients and developing these types of solutions, and whether it's our stuff or not, it's pretty product agnostic for us. So,
okay, so what's all BAS, EMs, ECMs? What's BAS?
BAS stands for Building Automation Systems.
Okay.
So controls on the wall, just a fancy way to call it.
That's estimated cost, Matt?
What's that?
What's the ECM, estimated cost?
ECM is an energy conservation measure.
Okay.
I'll blame Dan. That's his slide.
Yeah.
We get used to using those terms.
I have so many acronyms.
Yeah.
And they repeat and duplicate and, okay. Has anything like this ever been done at to analyze this building.
No, this building is managed by the county.
Yeah, it's kind of a dual.
And so, no, because our contract's with the city, we don't have any purview
Right.
necessarily. Not that we couldn't walk upstairs and knock on the door, but there's always an opportunity. You do have, I think, VRF systems within here, from what I can my nerdiness can tell just by looking at your cassettes. But yeah, there's certainly opportunity in all buildings that we would be happy to talk to.
Yeah, and this is actually managed by a building authority with membership from both the city and the county, and the refrigerant system. That was about a $3 million project, I don't know, 5 years ago or so. So I know there was a lot of design put into that particular aspect of it, but I don't know how much analysis.
Commissioner Davis and I are on the building authority board, and so I just.
But we'd be happy to look at it for you.
My mind started.
So I don't know that we need action out of you today. This does dovetail very well into the strategic planning conversations we've had, the budget preparation that we're doing, and we'll be bringing it as another item for your consideration as we put the budget together. Yeah, I assume you're seeing a theme here in terms of us trying to identify categories and put this level of planning together. And when we get all that done, we start to have a sense of, okay, what annual expenses, if we were going to be well-planned and well-prepared, what's that annual expense look like compared to available funds? That's when the rubber meets the road, and we'll have some tough decisions to make, but we've got an opportunity to kind of plan our future more so than ever.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Forward to working with you in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no development business. That will bring us to other business. Is there anything a commissioner would like to bring
None.
to our attention? Okay. With that, we'll move into citizens forum. This is an opportunity for citizens to come forward. We have 3 minutes for you to address an issue that was not on the agenda. Is there anyone who'd like to come forward? Okay, with that, we spent last Friday doing strategic planning, and we're not able to complete that, so we are going to complete that during a portion of our regular scheduled meeting here. So I know I need a second to pull my other material out here, and
Marked it, there we go.
I think we were ready for the police department. And I will. Mr. Scragg, you want to?
Again, for those that may not have tuned in on yeah, you're welcome to join me. For those that may not have tuned in on Friday, as I described it, we conducted a brainstorming session with staff. What we're presenting as part of the PowerPoint presentation is the summary results of that brainstorming, and then view this as kind of a brainstorming session with the City Commission. Opportunity to ask questions, get questions answered, and then we will compile this into a survey of sorts where you can indicate individually whether you agree, whether you feel it is a priority, yes, no, or neutral, and then to what extent, let you rate that on a scale in terms of priority. Then we are meeting again on the 18th in a shorter session, but that'll be an opportunity to report out the results, start to have some conversations about setting some priorities. And as I said before, I'm absolutely confident there's way more here than we can fit into the budget, but it's the start of the conversations, and it's certainly a prioritization exercise. So with the police department, tried to divide them up by divisions, and some of the high-level stuff is there's conversation about would we need a south substation at some point in the future? We had conversations about training center offerings. We have the new law enforcement training center itself. What can we do in the way of programming, both for our own officers in-house, as well as offering training that serves a regional purpose, but might also help us in terms of our recruitment and getting our profile out as a department. And then training center improvements themselves, the possibility of a training city where you've got some scenarios and physical different things that can recreate activities as well. And then leadership development at the supervisor level, curriculum development, training center programming, creating kind of an ongoing curriculum. We've talked previously about the co-responders program, and my understanding is they were doing a background check on one individual maybe about 2 weeks ago, so hopeful that we might be bringing someone on board. But you may recall that was a joint venture with the county and the health department and Central Kansas Mental Health for 2 positions. We fully expect that the need will be there, and the need for expansion is probably right around the corner. A 24/7 crisis intervention center is a concept that above and beyond just law enforcement and kind of the typical response, trying to provide some 24/7 crisis intervention. My slides may be out. Oh, there we go. So
I skipped a slide there.
Okay.
I was going to ask. I thought
maybe my slides were out of order.
We were at the back of the room, they were giving me the high sign, and I didn't understand. So I'm one slide off, but I think we're good now.
All right. Yeah. So new Justice Center versus expansion into the vacated sheriff space. And I think we've had some passing conversation about this topic, but with the county's construction of a jail, and when it becomes complete, they will be moving out, they being not only the jail operations, but the sheriff operations. And so at a staff level, we've had conversations about whether the city might have any interest in any of that space. We went so far as to use the designer that we use for the training center to take a look at what space might be of use to the department, how that might be able to be renovated, and suffice it to say, I think if we have an interest, our interest would be in the sheriff space, the office space, not the jail cells and the rest of that facility. And I've gone ahead and communicated to the county administrator a general interest. He is, you probably are well aware, has his hands full with some very broad and challenging space needs for district court judges that have been added, prosecutor space, community corrections space, and I think we talked in strategic planning last week about the possibility of a community space assessment where we jointly could go together and assess needs and available spaces from Memorial Hall to the building that the senior center's in. So as it relates to the Justice Center, I do think that they're going to ask of us, are we interested, so they can begin making their plans. I've preliminarily indicated that we are. We've had some conversations about, as they move operations around, could we work with them to make it available for a user temporarily until they can kind of get their house in order. So I think we've got a lot of additional conversations to be had there. The other concept is an entirely new Justice Center, start over, separate and distinct from the Law Enforcement Center. Both of those carry with them sizable price tags, but I don't know where PD came up with the number, but they came, I think their new Justice Center number was $80 million or more. So that's a daunting number. The renovation of the sheriff's space initial estimate was in the $8 million range, and that in and of itself is daunting. At some point, it would probably be worthwhile to give you a tour of the police space, the law enforcement center space, just to refresh your memory of how dated it is, how wedged in we are, how we're kind of desperately making use of the space that we do have. Staffing levels, we went through kind of our current deployment and identified our staffing challenges just in terms of full staffing at our current authorized levels. So the areas that are most challenged, which is pretty broad reaching, are the drug task force, detectives, traffic control, dispatch, and school resource officers. So just trying to get those filled from a recruitment and retention standpoint is an ongoing challenge. Then additionally, possible additional staff needs, if we were to add a beat, that's equivalent to 6 additional full-time officers, and then justification can be made for the need for additional detectives, dispatchers, supervisors, training staff, and cybercrime staff above and beyond our current full staffing levels. So having said all that, we also struggle to recruit, not just in PD, but across the organization. So we have this ongoing conversation about additional staffing needs, and then what can we realistically recruit and retain given the job market these days. And then we've talked a little bit before about mental health court and some of our prior strategic planning conversations last week, and then a homelessness response team approach. There are examples out there of other communities that have task force or have a response team approach, and that is something that continues to be in the community conversation. So I'm going to stop there before we move into a different segment of PD, give Chief Weiss an opportunity to comment, and then give you an opportunity to ask questions.
And to kind of touch on the homeless approach team, that kind of mirrors exactly kind of what we're doing with the co-responders program. And once we get that, and I think I'm set for either this week or next week to interview the co-responder. They've passed all the from Kansas Mental Health, all their prerequisites, and then so they should be coming on board very soon. But that is kind of it's going to be the same team. You know, I talked to our CIT officer today, and they will handle a lot of the same stuff, you know, where they will go out and check on these people that may be, you know, dealing with mental health issues and that may be homeless, and they will be, you know, giving them resources, hopefully to, you know, maybe stay on medication and stuff like that, to maybe and help find housing and stuff like that. So those are kind of one and the same. So when you see our CIT co-responder, we're going to morph that and take on the homeless issue also with it.
Did we fund that, or was that a grant?
Well, we are providing office space, providing equipment, and there's some preliminary funding of the wages through the county and the health department. But I think there's an expectation that as we get through that kind of that pilot project, we're going to be expected to participate long term.
Question. First of all, I've heard a lot of positive comments from the public on your drug bust last week. That was fairly substantial, and we appreciate that, and congratulations. I know we used to have like an I-70, you'd hear about I-70 drug task force. What do we have currently, whether it's local or statewide, that addresses the drug issue?
The local, you know, with our manpower issues, we've absorbed those into patrol. And our plan is to get those positions filled first once we get patrol filled back in. And there's also some talk of, you know, KBI is very interested in helping us out, and so is the sheriff's office. And we're working on some plans, even though we're still short-staffed, you know, covering some overtime and stuff to do some more proactive type stuff. But it will be, once we get some more staffing, we'll be putting more people back into our drug task force to address all this.
In fact, Jacob, if you want to go back to that full staffing slide, yeah. So that's first subset under staffing levels, the full staffing challenges. As we're able to hire and get back to full staffing, those are the areas of need that'll get supplemented.
How did the I-70 drug task force used to work? Was that?
It was a cooperative venture with the county, Saline County, Dickinson County, City of Abilene, and City of Salina. I think we kind of carried it. We staffed it. We carried the bulk of it, but there was I'd have to go back and take a look at the agreement, but there was an agreement in place and some proportional funding and staffing.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if we used to hear about that. So,
where are we on staffing today?
We're sitting at 68 right now, and that's including. We've got about 8 or 9 that are either in the academy or entering into the field training program, and then we've got a handful right now that are in the process that are, you know, either passed the test and are going on to, you know, the background or something like that. So we're probably got about 4 or 5 sitting right there.
So that 68 does not include the number in field training?
That does.
It does?
Yes.
Okay.
And in my sense for the last 3-4 months, maybe more, is hiring is exceeding people leaving the organization, but then we've got to get through the academy, get through field training, and get them on the street. But we still have need to hire more.
This open?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know what the chief was going to say some more stuff. My particular question was, and I think I have the name wrong, but the Citizens
Academy?
No, the Law Enforcement Review Board.
Citizens Academy?
No, not the Academy.
Yeah, the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board?
That one, yeah, thank you. That went, the original plan, as I understood it, was that in addition to reviewing cases that would occasionally come up, but to be somewhat proactive, just looking at certain metrics of performance, whatever we wanted, to look at, not usurping your role as the administrator, but, do we have issues with certain interactions? And to be more of a proactive board, an information dispensing board, not just one that sits there 2 times a year when a case comes up. Have you had a chance to meet with that board since you've started yet?
Other than our last meeting, we talked, and I offered to meet outside if there's any type of issues that may come up, or and so I haven't had anything since that time. No.
And I would suggest we need to start with how we empower them. I mean, I know there was some conversation about providing them updates on policies in addition to hearing complaints, but I don't know that we task them with the level of authority that you might have just described.
Right. Well, when it first started, I think Mayor Hodges was in office then, but that was sort of our lofty goal, that it not just be there to hear complaints, but to be of some assistance in creating that meaningful dialogue between citizens and officers.
Yeah, and we certainly have reviewed policies. I mean, we've gone through some of those things, and at the last meeting, we kind of took some suggestions on what they might want to look at. We've tried to kind of come up with some general reports that we provide them, and move forward with that sort of thing. But certainly, as City Manager Scraggs said, their authority is really reviewing those cases and then reviewing any policies that the city that the police department has. And so we have tried to bring those to them, and they do have the ability to say, hey, we'd like to look at a policy, and we'll bring it to them. So they can do that.
Okay, thank you.
When that board was set up, it was encouraged and recommended that those members attend the Citizens Law Enforcement Academy, which this past year were not able to have it due to staffing. And I don't know where in the future, I hope we pick that back up. It's a venture between the county and the city. But in the meantime, I know I think we have a few new board members on there. I would like to see it encouraged and recommended them do ride-alongs.
Yeah, I think we stopped short of requiring that they go through the academy and encouraged it. But
I know when I went through, there was 3 members, 2 or 3, that did attend the academy.
Yeah, so we have encouraged it and did have several that went through it. And I think what we're planning to do is maybe in some of the upcoming meetings kind of try and do a mini academy, so bring some of the things that happen at the Citizens Academy to the board and present it in that way, so that everybody has an opportunity to go through some of those things.
It is a sizable commitment.
It is. And even if they met out at the training center sometime and went through the simulator.
And we have done that.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next category is kind of an inventory of equipment and replacement schedule. You can see there, I think it's fairly comprehensive. License plate readers are new to the list. Body cameras and body armor are something that we've done for a long time. So I want to give Chief free rein to comment as he sees fit, but our conversation was kind of a conclusion that we're pretty fully equipped. We have never really held back in terms of providing the police department equipment that they need. I think from a budget standpoint, it's more making sure we have an inventory of it and we're prepared to keep it current and keep it replacing it on a timely basis. But
no, I totally agree. And, and a lot of our stuff, our technology too, it's fee-based, and it's a subscription-based. So every 5 years or so, we're having to re-up, with our body cameras and different equipment like that. And then even, with like our weapons, eventually, I know they're fairly new. Down the road, there's, the red dot sights on top of pistols is kind of the industry standard right now, and so that's something eventually we'll look at and everything. But no, I think we're very fortunate to have the support and the equipment we do. It is very up to date, and it keeps us at the top, and so we appreciate that.
Is the data and evidence you maintain, and as the technology improves, is that an issue? I mean, we're kind of keeping a museum, aren't we, of information and stuff?
It is.
Where's that all go?
Yeah, in the cloud somewhere. I mean, the best that I can. It's all. Everything is going for. Very few things are paper anymore, and then so. It is definitely a lucrative business if you run some kind of data management system for, I'm sure, in any organization, but especially in law enforcement, because it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And so,
is it useful to go back and catalog, scan all of the paper and
yes, and
digitalize it,
and that's what we do. Yeah, we archive
works?
it and everything. Yes.
Between police and court, we're actively number one trying to identify the required retention period, and then convert old database data into a format that is compatible with the new database, as well as physically scan and get it entered into the system. And then the thing that's impressive to me about the evidence database technology is it now can facilitate a citizen submitting photos and video and evidence directly into the system. Police can work with it, and then they can share it with the prosecutor, and it can ultimately be shared with a defense attorney and the judge. And so it's very
seamless. So with the new AI
it can be
that's
seamless.
available and seems to be coming, is that going to be at people's fingertips someday?
We, other than just reading it as an interested citizen, I have not been involved in any AI conversations just yet. I'm a little concerned about the accuracy of it, and I think there might be some opportunities there, but we're really more focused on kind of the established technology at the moment.
One of the neat things that's coming on board is through our data, and it pulls, and it'll be facing to the public where they can pull up like hot spots of criminal activity in certain areas, and so that pulls everything from our reports, and it puts it at their fingertips to where they can look in areas, so they don't have to call and go, hey, what's the crime like in this area? So that's a pretty neat deal, and that's coming online.
You mentioned optics. Or is law enforcement using optics on handguns now?
Yes, it is going that way. A lot of agencies are going that way. It improves accuracy and everything, and so we've got a couple of our firearms instructors are going to training to learn more about them, because there's very different variations of them, and you need to look at what's the best and that. But yeah, that is definitely where the state of law enforcement is going as far as firearms.
And has everybody been outfitted with the new vest now, the outside vest?
Not everybody. We've got like a 2-year, once you've been here 2 years, and then you can get it. And then so almost everybody has been.
I don't know what the vest is.
It's kind of what you would say it's the outer carrier you see. I think one of our
Officer Brown has one on.
Yeah,
he can come model.
And it's less strain physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, takes all the weight off of your lower back, because it's everything's off most of everything is off your belt, and so it's up on your chest. So it helps with your back issues, and also just being able to have more equipment accessible to you, right here.
So do we have a replacement plan for those? You know, they're new now, but
No, we
5
really don't,
years,
because it's kind of.
I don't know how long they expect to last.
Those are a little different because it's not, like our body armor has a 5-year lifespan, and then after 5 years, they're not warranted anymore. And so those are, they're just a carrier, and so it's more of a wear-based deal. Like if you wear them out, like some officers may wear them out faster, and it comes out of their clothing allowance.
Well, that's not the armor in those?
No, it slips in there, but it's just the carrier itself.
Okay,
Yeah,
I thought it was the whole deal.
Yeah, and it just slips in there.
That's got to be really hot having all that on.
Yeah, I think that actually makes it cooler than wearing like this, because this is, it's tight to your body, and so it doesn't allow for much air to get in here. Those are, you can, if you, if you're doing a report or whatever, you can take it off and kind of relax.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Public Works.
Thank you, Chief. I need to apologize in advance for Public Works. I'm not going to say Jim overwhelmed me, but he gave me a lot of information, and I kind of ran out of steam getting it all organized like I might have with other departments. And then you combine that, Jim's got a lot of different divisions between sanitation, landfill, traffic control, levee, flood control protection, that type of thing. So this is going to be a little bit interspersed more than I might have liked. So as kind of the broad overview items, we're working on capital expenditure planning, and there's a lot of categories there. I feel like we've made good headway in terms of pavement management, inventorying bridges, culverts, those type of things, but there's just a lot within their purview that we're working on. Culvert inspection and maintenance, pond inspection and maintenance, and ponds, you may recall, our current policy is we will accept detention bonds in commercial and residential subdivisions if they, we calculate the cost of maintenance for 10 years. If they pay that, then we'll take it in perpetuity. And so you might find yourself thinking, well, how many ponds could we possibly have? But because of that policy, Public Works has quite a few in their inventory that they're responsible for. Sidewalk gap program, we've had that conversation before, but we have a good inventory of gaps. We also have a good scoring matrix of kind of prioritizing how we're going to tackle those, and we have an annual budget allocation for that. I think we'll be spending those funds annually for quite some time before we feel like we've got our hands around the sidewalks, but we're committed and making headway. The landfill master plan you've seen previously, feel real good about the level of detail and how much thought's gone into that. Things that represent challenges for us are the utility patch workload. I think I've shared with you before. It sounds a little odd, but in natural disasters, you hear the saying, look for the helpers. As it relates to street work, I'd encourage you to look for the patches. If you really pay attention, there's so much work out there, so widely spread across the system that the Public Works staff are just on a daily basis having to track and try to keep up with. But I'm impressed with how they're able to do that, but it's a never-ending task. Same way, and then utility locates has been a challenge in years past, and with fiber the way it is now, that's taken on a life of its own. In fact, I had a conversation with Monty Hull the other day about how many locates they were doing on a daily basis, but can you provide any context to our utility locates at the moment?
I guess all I would say is Monty has stood up several extra teams. Martha's going to follow me, and she may have more of the details. We do traffic control locates, and our guys are extraordinarily busy, but that's multiplied for Monty and his crews. So he's had to stand up several other teams to help with locates. I will say that to date, the current fiber optic company that is begun installation in Salina has worked well with a lot of staff input to control the amount of areas or permits that we'll take on in a given week. So that's been appreciated. But yeah, the workload just for utility patches represents about 75% of what streets do on a daily basis now, and that is a pretty new phenomenon. So every time utilities has a break, when they finish that repair, then the streets crews have to put that patch back and restore the road. And Martha has stood before you on several occasions before and indicated that that number has gone up in recent years. So between those two things, the workload is pretty intense.
So snow and
Short-staffed as well.
Yes, if you ask me today, we're down 10 staff positions.
Snow and ice removal is an ongoing challenge and something that we worry about well in advance of snow season. The obvious issue is the staffing challenge, and not just the hiring, but the need for CDL licenses and how hard those are to come by and how competitive the pay rates are for CDL holders. We've had some conversations, and frankly, I think we're going to need to have a lot more conversations about alternate approaches. And one possibility is equipment that's sized such that it doesn't require a CDL license. That's going to be considerably smaller, changes not only our equipment inventory, but how we deploy. We've had conversations about contracting, but it's kind of hard to get a contractor's attention when the need is unknown and so sporadic. And a conversation that we've had internally but have not broached with you as the governing body, I don't think, to this point, is a reduced response, changing the expectations, concentrating our staff and energy on collectors and arterials and pulling back from residential, or at least accepting the fact that it's going to take considerably more time. And to say that it takes more time does not mean that we can just have our existing employees plowing for 24 or 36 hours in a row. It'd take a change in our deployment and just a change in expectations altogether.
Well, I can recall when it was very rare that residential streets were treated.
We've had that conversation as we compare ourselves to peer communities. Honestly, I couldn't tell you historically what Salina has done, but we somehow have ended up at treatment of residential streets, and we have yet to
I don't know when
back away from that.
Transpired to doing 100%.
Yep.
But it was.
Is there a downside to treating residential streets? Does it affect the street? I know I worry about walking my dogs and stuff like that, and that brine and the materials you put down. But is it?
No, sir. There shouldn't be any adverse effect on the streets from doing the treatment. Just in terms of programming, it's just about having enough staff for each 12-hour shift to keep 24-hour operations running, and just the challenges of staffing.
Runs in our sewer and back into our water system. Does anybody ever worry about what's in that salt or whatever the material is we put on the ground?
It is a magnesium chloride brine. I would ask again for Ms. Tasker to comment on how that impacts her water treatment facilities, but none that I'm aware of.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, we increased I think we increased the CDL hourly rate. Did that help any? Yeah, or is it still too low?
No, ebbed and flowed, but no noticeable change.
Yeah, I would say that we've, over the past couple of months, it's helped to some degree. But again, we still have those openings, and we see that not just in streets, just across the board. There's just a level of employment that we've struggled to be able to fill.
And we've tried to start an approach where we're hiring without CDLs and trying to assist them with training and securing their CDL with mixed results. And then you always have to wonder, once they've secured their CDL, whether they're going to move on.
So the contracting, we've tried for 2 years unsuccessfully. The first year, we didn't get a bidder. We talked to all the bidders to find out why. We made changes to that bid process. Last year, we got one bid, and it was extraordinarily higher than what we had forecast for budgeting to make it a reasonable proposal. So we didn't move forward with that. I will say that we've been granted the ability to create a laborer position in streets, and now we struggle to fill those positions as well. We had thought that if we didn't place the CDL requirement on that person, we're like in the process in the 2024 budget to replace 2 of our dump trucks that require a CDL with 1-ton trucks that do not, in hopes that we could use non-CDL licensed operators and augment them into the snow and ice program, still keeping some dump trucks and some 1-tons. The challenge for hiring these people is still occurring even with the non-CDL requirement.
Moving on, the Salina Drop-Off Recycling Center Household Hazardous Waste Program, just with changes in the recycling market and some of the things that have taken place recently, is going to require us to take another look and talk about refinements, improvements, possible service changes in response to that. Untarped loads is something that I think is going to be before you pretty quickly. We have measures in place for a tipping fee and some funding for cleanup of haul routes, but it's continuing to be a problem. It's not at all uncommon for there to be a requirement for tarped loads. In fact, it is required, but it's not uncommon for landfills to add an additional charge if the load is not tarped, primarily as a deterrent, more so than a funding mechanism to fund additional litter pickup, but we've got to change some habits in that regard. Solid Waste Management Committee, we've had conversations a couple years ago about their role, their authority, and their membership. We struggle to get appointees, and it's a pretty sizable group, and just in terms of the numbers. So that's something that we think merits coming back and taking a look at, and it is formed under statutory authority, so there are some parameters outside of our control, but we could take a look at that. Moving on to staffing requests, I think Jim's running a close second to the fire department. They may be neck and neck, I'm not sure. GIS analyst or right-of-way permit coordinator is a position that they've identified. 2 street laborers. Now, this is in addition to vacancies. This is not trying to fill our vacancies. These are requests above and beyond vacancies. 2 street maintenance workers, an SDRC driver, a landfill scale house staff person, a landfill operator, another person in traffic control, another person in flood control, and additional staffing for utility locates. And I can't entirely argue with some of those. In particular, the utility locates, the flood control, the traffic control, the landfill, those are all kind of running at minimal staffing compared to the workload that they have. So
these are positions you want to add in addition to what's already open.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And utility locates, can we contract that with the outfit that does all the locates?
I'm not laughing at your question. I'm laughing that we've had this conversation, and we looked into that great length, and not to disparage the company, but we didn't come away with enough confidence in their ability to locate our utilities or their ability to staff and be responsive. And if they mislocate and it gets hit, it remains on us. So
they typically just don't do water and sewer and stuff.
Oh, they can. You can contract for them. Then we'd have to coordinate with them in some way to have knowledge of where our utilities are so they could locate them on our behalf. And it's not just the typical water and sewer. It's traffic control at intersections and traffic lights. And so a combination of kind of need for accuracy and accountability, among other things, we determined that we felt it more appropriate to keep it in-house and try to
So is there a fee levied for the locates like this company does?
There's a fee on us. We would pay them on a per locate basis.
Does the
but-
city charge when someone
Right.
wants to locate? Do they charge?
No, we have an obligation through the state program to locate in response to those requests within 48 hours. Yeah, 48 hours.
48 hours.
One of the issues we run into is having so many requests for locates that it outruns the contractor's ability to get the work done. The locate expires, and we get called back 2 and 3 times to locate the same utilities as their timeline drags out, and there is no fee for that.
And I did, prior to this meeting, speak with Martha, and I told her that this was on that list, and I'm certainly willing to say that traffic control has done a very good job at managing the locates in addition to all their other business. If we had if we could get it the way I think would best serve the organization as a whole, I would say that one person in traffic control is needed to do the business of traffic control, and we may want to put that locate person in a team to help Monty, where the majority of those locates have to occur. But that's a discussion that we can have.
So, not looking for answers today necessarily,
Right.
but to give you a sense there, that's 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 additional staff requested. On the training side, we touched on CDL training and trying to facilitate that in-house, forklift training, internal certifications, trying to create a promotion structure to work your way up through the organization as you're securing certifications. Llama is our software that we use for land management and permitting, and right-of-way permitting dovetails into that. Need to coordinate there. Munis is our overarching Tyler Technology software and water billing coordination. It could help with sanitation billing. Certification for our central garage employees in various different categories for repair and maintenance. And then special event permitting is kind of a new process that Development Services has rolled out, but Public Works staff has a role to play in that, and we'll need to do training going forward. Materials, supplies, and equipment, things that were identified were we're going to have added heating expense because we are not using as much oil or doing oil changes through the enterprise lease program. With new equipment, we're not doing it at Central Garage. We're not generating as much waste oil, and I guess a side consequence of that is less oil to use to heat.
We take that oil and put it into waste burners and heat the Central Garage and other facilities with that oil. As the backstory, with new vehicles that are under warranty that get serviced through dealers, we no longer have access to that waste oil. So I don't think this is significant, but I thought it was worth mentioning that there is that extra cost that we'll now absorb into the budget.
We've talked recently about the landfill soil deficit and our purchase and just kind of the ongoing need to accumulate soil for the landfill. Traffic control reflective backplates will be an ongoing implementation. Permanent and temporary fencing at the landfill seems like a perennial purchase item that we need. Wayfinding signage, if you're familiar with that signage, it's, I don't know how old it is. It's older than you might think, but it's noticeably fading on the backs and on the black poles to the point that it doesn't make the positive impression that it used to, and we're going to have to deal with that in some way. Plus, we have need for updated content, and so that gets to be a surprising ticket pretty quickly. Yellow curbing, we've got a lot of painted curb throughout the community that made a policy decision a few years back. We weren't going to repaint it anymore, but it's showing its age. Jim and his staff have gone to great lengths of trying to experiment in ways to get it off the curb. With everything else they've got going on, I think we need to think about just contracting that work out. And I'd encourage you as you drive around, just pay attention to the curbs. And once you start looking, it's hard not to see it anymore.
But we just rely on signs to tell people where to park and where not to park.
Yes, we've got a lot of yellow curb that I think we meant well, but I'm not sure in hindsight it needs to be yellow. Some of it may need to go back, either with signage or painting, but the current condition is so peeled and in disrepair that we got to deal with it first.
The red for the school zone still, that remains.
Yeah, some of it will have to remain, but there in certain neighborhoods, the corners of intersections are painted yellow, which, man, I would hope 90% it's common sense you don't park where we have yellow curbs in the first place and you'd be subject to ticketing. But not to dwell on it, we've probably dwelled on it longer than we need to, but it's just one of those things that is an example of a responsibility that just starts to overwhelm us, and if we don't have a plan, it gets away from us. Staining the median pavers, they're showing their age as well, and there is a process that they can be stained and kind of rejuvenated. If you think about the 9th Street corridor and kind of being one of our front doors to the community, aesthetically, that can make a big difference.
Go back up here to your yellow paint. As you know, it's been one of my concerns of painting fire, and I don't know which department it is, if it's yours or utilities, painting fire hydrants.
Yeah, Martha's waving her hand in the back.
Martha, okay, we'll get to her.
Yep. So concrete barriers, I've always heard them referred to as Jersey barriers, but the concrete barriers, we have a supply and they just, they break down, and some of them don't get used and don't come back for some reason. So just an inventory item we need to address. And then Jim mentioned it, but fuel cost volatility across the organization's a big challenge.
You wouldn't think of it, but we spend a lot of time watching international news and what's happening in the markets. And if you saw recently, OPEC and the other oil-producing nations they refer to as OPEC Plus have just recently, at the beginning of April, announced that they are reducing production pretty significantly over what they had promised earlier in the year. And that will have an effect on our fuel prices. So it's something that we try to watch and pay attention to and try to make intelligent guesses at how the department should go about budgeting for fuel usage.
So are you saying we're going to have $5 gas by summer?
I wouldn't say that. I would say that I think the fuel prices are going up.
Yeah, they cut production 1 million barrels a day.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
1 million barrels a day they cut production.
Yeah.
So we have another category but we can pause if that makes sense, whichever you prefer. Okay. So facility-wise, we've had conversations for quite some time about expanding the public works facility or having a campus of sorts, and we've done some things with hangars and equipment that have tried to maximize what we do have in the way of a footprint, but I think additional conversation is merited about what that long-term vision looks like and whether we're ready to go pursue that. That could then facilitate fuel site upgrades. That location, the equipment itself is outdated, and if there were a campus approach, it could be factored into that. Same way with household hazardous waste, it's kind of in a postage stamp of a footprint next to the fuel site at the moment. E-waste is something that it takes on heightened importance and could get factored in. Salina Drop-Off Recycling Center, we've had ongoing conversations about effectiveness and efficiency, and do we build facilities to separate recyclables to be better able to get it to markets and get some additional interest in those items. Traffic signal synchronization review, that's an ongoing, they are synchronized, there is an approach, but it's just an ongoing conversation about whether they're working effectively, and so we identified that might be something to bring someone in and from the outside and take a hard look at. Fiber optic service to the traffic signals, that certainly would be a system upgrade, and with all the fiber optic work that's going on, there might be an opportunity. The downtown Star Bond project, there are some remaining funds. The master agreement, the development agreement with the master developer had a prioritization of expending those funds. And so Jim in particular, but staff have been working on some things that have come up in conversation. One that I threw into the conversation was some remote control of the overhead structures and their light system. There's 5 of them that you have to go to the top of and plug in to change the color scheme, and it's just incredibly cumbersome. I told Jim I want him to just be able to dial it up on his phone and pick the color scheme and have it be as automated as possible, because it is popular and it does generate conversation, and there's an underlying expectation that it shouldn't be as hard as it currently is. So that solution's harder to come by than we might think.
Doesn't the vendor just have something? I mean, he probably didn't sell it to us to begin with. We'd be back for it.
Yeah, so each of these are currently, it's a system called Pharos, and each of the Pharos units are independent, so they do not talk to each other. So the first step of the process is what equipment is necessary to make Pharos talk to each one of the other ones so that we can synchronize changing them. Once we have that in place, then it will be a request to you for having a cloud-based system, a subscription system that we would pay for. And it's certainly doable. You could do it from, the traffic control foreman could sit in his truck with his laptop and do it in that regard. The city engineer could do it from his office. But the first thing, and what has been probably what's held this up longer than we would like, is the ability for that Pharos unit to talk to each of the units. So I have re-engaged with that company, and we're trying to work through that solution now.
I think the mayor should have an app.
Yeah, right.
Permanently purple.
The other 2 items that have come up in that conversation are shade structures at the Love Salina stage at Ash and Santa Fe. Apparently it got so hot we had some lawn chairs sinking into the asphalt this past summer. So. Right. Shade would be helpful there. And then we've been approached about the Temple parking lot. It does kind of serve as a community parking lot for parades and gatherings and what have you. And so there was an inquiry about whether there was any way to help them with that. Haven't committed to that. Jim's been working on cost estimates for all of that to then share with the master developers, get their feedback, and then bring back to the governing body. So
on the e-waste, lost my sheet, e-waste, it says alternate location. Is there a place that folks can take e-waste during the year? I know we have the big event in May.
Right.
Is that referring to just that once-a-year event, or?
No, really this is referring to creating a location. Right now, our location is that we do it once a year at the Berkeley Family Recreation Area. But this is there the ability to create a way that we could collect this material more often, either, maybe not through an event, but through just common everyday, being able to take that from citizens as the need occurs. A lot of people don't use, and that was one of the comments that came out in the public meeting, is that a lot of people indicated that they don't use they don't attend the e-waste event because they bought their TV 6 months ago, and they don't want to hang on to their old one for that long. So trying to figure out a way to handle that much material and process it in a timely manner, given our staff an extraordinarily small footprint.
Back to the Love Salina stage shade. Is my idea, we just heard solar is good for what is it, 30%, 40% tax credit? Is that
Go ahead.
Okay,
that
so
a viable idea at all?
So first of all, after the meeting, I immediately said I'll take this on. I researched and found a particular company who specializes in the kinds of shade products that I plan on bringing to you on the 1st of May in a study session. And their engineers have taken our site plan. It's fortunate that they use the same kind of structures that one of the bidders who responded to my request uses. It's actually a sister company of theirs. So those two companies are currently working together, and I am hoping, I don't know if he'll have it ready for me, but I am hoping before the study session comes that I'll be able to present you with, here's what this would cost if we did shade, here's what this would cost if we did shade plus solar. And I expressed to him what my concerns were about having, and you heard even the distance from Kenwood Cove to TPEC makes it difficult and very expensive. So I was asking him, these are very large structures. They build them. Dallas-Fort Worth has covered solar parking as an example. This company is the company that built those. And they do this for all different kinds of industry around the United States. And I was initially concerned that our parking lot was going to be too small because we're talking about between 12 and about 42 stalls that we would cover. But they said that this is certainly within their purview and they'll try to put it together. I asked him, what would we do with any energy that we produced? And you know, what have you learned in your experience? And he said, probably the biggest thing, the greatest use that you could have, because he immediately mentioned what the gentleman from Schneider Electric indicated to you, that you have to work with your energy company to determine how much you could put back in or how much you can recover at a given site. So he suggested that we would install 2 electric vehicle charging stations, which would more than use the amount of energy produced, and that customers using those facilities would pay for any electricity that was used by that system.
So correct me if I'm
that's
wrong,
what that is.
But one financially viable way to do it is we offset a use that we're paying full rate for the electric consumption. We don't have that in proximity to that stage location.
Right.
So then you either put it into a charging station like Jim described, but then we're gonna have to look at the added cost for the solar in return for the charging station, or you try to sell it back to the power company, but they don't buy it back at the price that you pay them for it, nowhere near that. And even then, you have to have a point of consumption that they're willing to work with you.
And I have also asked Schneider to look at that and see if it was a viable option. And the first thing they said is, where are you going to use the energy at? And it really doesn't make sense to sell it back to Evergy. It's like I think we pay 11 or 12 cents a kilowatt hour, and they pay generally about 1 to 2 cents a kilowatt hour for anything that you generate that goes back into the system. So it's not like they take a look at the city's overall big bill and say, okay, you're paying $900,000, we'll just reduce it off. It has to be connected to a specific meter and that energy that's used at that meter at that time. So Schneider is going to look. There may be some locations at the city that's viable. I'm not sure if there are or not just yet, but they're going to look at that a little bit more in more detail. The stage specifically, though, because it's not tied into anything that really uses a whole lot of power, may not be something that pencils.
Maybe we could run it across the street and let them pay for the project.
Across the street.
Isn't that right across the street from KU Med School?
It is, yeah.
Well, just that distance really does matter, though.
Just across the street, that's a big deal.
Well, the first thing that crossed my mind was streetlights, but the way we're built for streetlights isn't very conducive to this setup either.
We'll see.
The good news is I took your challenge and we are exploring it.
Thank you.
So moving to the next slide, in terms of policies and programs that we identified and I've said this before, but we've got more things identified than we have capacity to take all this on at one time. But waste reduction strategies, we've been before you before with the waste characterization study and trying to develop those strategies. I think changes in the recycling market, changes in our recycler that we're taking our waste to make this even more challenged, but that's an ongoing conversation. Replacement plans, particularly heavy equipment in the Public Works Department. Pavement management, feel like we've done a really good job of inventorying and putting a plan together, but we need CPI, continued process improvement review and improvements. We need to assess how that plan's performing and the life cycle of the products that we're putting down. And then we also have to keep up with cost of inflation to be able to maintain that plan. So probably looking at a performance assessment, looking at plan revisions, looking at budget increases based on those revisions and inflation. Landfill cell design and construction is an ongoing effort at the landfill, as you know. Berkeley Family Recreation Area runway deterioration. Seems a little odd that it's in the Public Works Department, but what was the former runway is a large expanse of concrete, as you know. It gets used by the KKOA for their drags. It also gets used by and I'm losing the acronym of the car club that does their they do their slalom events, and the Public Works Department has dealt with kind of heaves due to heat and replace those segments, but the surface itself is spalling and off, and so it's more so on the edges than the center, but we're starting to have conversations about the cost of replacing that, repairing that relative to the benefit, and we don't charge users at the moment for that, and that cost will be sizable. I think that's going to be a policy decision as much as anything that'll be coming to you as soon.
How thick is that concrete?
I don't know for sure. It's pretty thick.
It's not as thick as out at Schilling.
It's pretty
10
thick.
to 12 inches.
Yeah.
I think it's mostly 12 inches.
We've gotten pavement management behind us. We have an inventory bridges. I think we shared that with you in a CIM not that long ago. Now it's time to get a schedule pulled together and get at least some sense of kind of those costs. That doesn't mean we're going to pay cash for them, but if we have to debt finance, what that schedule might look like. Similarly, culvert replacement schedule has been a little bit catch as catch can. Did you tell me you inventoried the number of those?
That's correct. So one of the challenges that I put back on engineering this past year was to basically do what we did with bridges for all of our culverts, getting an inventory and then assessing their condition. So we should have that presentation sometime this year.
How many were in the inventory?
It was sizable. I don't remember the number, but it was a lot more than you would anticipate.
It doesn't mean they all have, they're failing and need replacement,
No.
but it's trying to get our arms around our inventory and our maintenance responsibility. Fairdale Road culvert in particular is identified as a need. Schilling Road bridge length culvert replacement's another identified project. Broadway medians, we've talked about those, and Jim and his staff have put together a timeline of moving forward on those. But if we wanted to talk about accelerating that, that might be a high-impact aesthetic project at least. I feel awkward referring to it as the Old City Dump, but we repeatedly refer to the Old City Dump out on State Street. If you've been by recently after your authorization of acquisition of soil and rental of equipment, it's noticeably different. They've done a lot of grading work and starting to get that site kind of finished graded and hopefully get it buttoned up once and for all. 4th Street Railroad intersection improvements, we just have locations where and that's kind of an ongoing thing with railroad intersections and the panels move around, but particular need there. Wayne Street is another railroad intersection by South Middle School that's noticeably rough. South 9th Street median improvements, the Mulberry Street brick paver. We have quite a bit of brick in our system, and we do a good job of maintaining it, but that's an added maintenance responsibility. And then Channel Road off of Iron Street, there's a block wall that was built there, and landscaping and some work that needs to be done to complete that. And again, I'll give you an opportunity to speak to any of those and then take questions.
I think only just, I appreciate the opportunity to present this. I told Mike at the beginning when we were doing this that I didn't know what the other departments were presenting, but for us it was all about really two issues. One, we are in need of people. And two, probably the second greatest issue that we have is getting some kind of program for our heavy equipment, especially in the streets work group, which is just a challenge. We always end up requesting significantly more than what can be awarded because, other departments have needs too. But much like what you heard from the other departments, we have many, many pieces of equipment that are 25 or 30 years old, and we really need to do something about it. I've got two loaders that can probably only have the capacity to pick up about half of what they used to, and it's just from age and the system's wearing out, despite ongoing maintenance. So for us, those two things are probably the two greatest things of importance that we find as challenges. But
So,
thank you.
Yeah, I would tell you that the capital improvement planning effort, staff met this morning. There's always going to be more inventory or more level of detail, but there's a high level of detail in the system now, and the task that's before staff as we go through this budget process is assessing all that, organizing all that, and then putting a price tag to it. Then we know, and I'm not naive enough to think that the budget's going to balance, nor are we just going to say, oh, that's the price tag, we need to pay for it. But that's the beginning of assessing the challenge ahead of us and then planning for it.
When downtown redevelopment started, the cost of rerouting the trains around, west of the airport and back was like $4 million. Has that ever come back up for discussion? Because our beautiful plans and schematic drawings for downtown, you never see the train tracks in those drawings. But it's like, well, boy, last time I checked, there were train tracks out there. Is that just a dead issue, trying to remove the trains from there? Or?
I wouldn't say. In the answer to your first question, has it come up? It comes up in conversation every now and then, but I have to admit, it is not just from a dollar price tag, but just from a scope, it is pretty overwhelming. As you inventory, there is need for use of that 4th Street railroad line at the end, so it couldn't just be abandoned. It would have to have an alternate route. But beyond that, no, we haven't. As we look at grant funding opportunities, it hasn't risen to the level of need of other things that we have in our system to even say that we'd try to pursue a grant for that.
Okay. East Magnolia, east of the soccer fields?
That bridge.
Does that fit in anywhere? That road is, if I didn't drive a Jeep, I'd call it undrivable, and connects to a substantial part of our new housing. So,
yes, and the width of that bridge and the ability to widen that bridge has been an ongoing conversation for quite some time.
Do we wait for the bridge to fail and then we fix it?
Well, I don't know that the bridge is at risk as much as we want to. If you want to have a bike trail and you want to have, additional lanes. I think it's a common.
It is rough. It's getting
not safe for a motorcycle. It's not safe for a bicycle. Like I say, it's in pretty bad shape.
Didn't we just approve some resurfacing out there?
I would have to check, but I believe East Magnolia is on the list.
The other thing we need to take a look at is just the city limits and jogging in and out, but there is increasing traffic load, and that certainly merits being on the list.
Yes. where you can have, a little more than 8 inches between oncoming traffic at 50 miles an hour, that weighs 80,000 pounds on that little bridge there. It's,
And then we've had conversations about West Magnolia, west of I-135, and pursuing funding with KDOT there. So, yep, both of those are.
And I have thought about this bridge replacement a lot over the years, and the importance of that connection across the river. Would we engineer and build a bridge and then reroute the road rather than closing it?
Oh, yeah, that's definitely part of the engineering design, but we haven't gotten to that level of detail.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Are we talking East Magnolia again?
Yeah. Build a new bridge, and with the
I know generally
still in service.
I know that generally when you're building a bridge like that, you're going to build it in phases so that you don't close the entire bridge. You construct the next part of that, the new bridge in it next to it, and then when you're able, you open traffic, and you kind of have to do it in segments, I guess.
Well, and I do know from some of the conversations with the River Project and the Iron Street, which is actually a box culvert, but the Iron Street Bridge, there are some innovative technologies out there that can get a bridge installed in a shorter duration of time, so that you kind of minimize the disruption by having segments and having them all staged and
in terms of bridge condition, that bridge is in good shape. It is not scheduled to be replaced anytime soon due to condition rating. If we wanted to do something because it no longer safely supported traffic on that end of town, then that would be a different discussion.
I seem to recall in one inspection scenario, it went way south, and there was a bunch of conversation about it, and I don't know any details, but it seemed like it got re-inspected and came up. So
I think mostly, because there's two sides to it. There's the side that's focused on usability, and the bridge is, as you all know, is not very usable in terms of how narrow it is when two cars are passing over the bridge at the same time. In terms of the structure being safe, that bridge is still rated reasonably well. I believe it's a 7, but I would have to go back and look. So I understand what you're saying, but I think one of the ratings, and I'm sure that I'll get beat up tomorrow by Mr. Johnson, the engineer, but who does the inspections. But it sort of focuses on the usability of the bridge, the safety factors of it, and it's a very narrow bridge.
So, and my next comment will get more phone calls than what you just said, but for the heavy traffic that comes through, I would just feel safer if the speed limit was lower. I mean, because people go faster than that speed limit out there, and the passing speed of two vehicles is approaching 100 miles an hour out there in that bridge.
We monitor accident counts and the nature of the accidents. It's never risen to an actual data set that says we have a problem. It may be perception more than actual accident count, but
it is surprising we've not had any incidents.
Yes, because both cars involved just went over the bridge into the river. You never saw them. Nobody's reported them missing.
I'm more concerned about all the truck traffic on it.
Right.
When you start talking about widening it, it's a greater ditch on both sides, which just makes it that much more challenging in terms of cost and construction.
Very expensive.
It's in our growth corridor, so it's just a matter of time. Anything else Public Works related? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to excuse myself. My Public Works is coming up. Be right back.
So while Martha's coming up, I want to preface this with, outside of the typical things that you think of in terms of utilities, she's doing groundwater contamination. She's doing the river project. She just finished a water plant project, and now we're headed into a sewer plant project. So her utilities department's plate is pretty darn full. But she's keeping all those balls in the air. Yeah. So we'll give it a minute for Commissioner Longbine and we'll jump in.
I didn't know what to bring, Mike, so.
We'll take it as it comes.
I remember the answers.
So I think the other theme with utilities is there's quite a bit of planning in place. There's quite a bit of funding in place. And there's a large volume of work and design and contracting to be done, and so we'll touch on that as we go through these different items. But some of these things are acknowledging a category and the fact that we're budgeted, and it's just an ongoing challenge to plan it and spend it, get the plans out the door. So with respect to administration, we continue to have conversations about recruiting for key positions. We created a deputy utility director position, how long ago?
About 3 years.
And have advertised it, have had difficulty filling it. Most recently, we brought in a recruitment firm to help us, and we'll see if we have some success that way. Keep saying it just takes one. We need one right candidate, but that is an ongoing struggle. It would help Martha in terms of workload and management supervision, and it is a priority. Career progression strategies is another thing that we've identified in the department, just trying to create a career track of certifications and be clear about opportunities for someone as they start in the department, how they can work their way through different positions, better themselves in terms of their compensation and their responsibilities. And then succession planning. We've kind of gone through a transition. We're working our way through it in different division head positions and leadership positions, but that career progression helps in terms of both the succession planning and the training, but those are ongoing priorities for administration. Breaking the department apart in kind of its different categories. On the water supply side, wells maintenance is an ongoing item that we're aware of and is budgeted. The Assurance District water, and we can go into that in greater detail if you like, but it's been paid for. Recreational water rights as it relates to the river project have been reserved. And then river inlet gates and pump station maintenance is an ongoing item for the water supply side. The water plant, the downtown water plant, there's ongoing maintenance, which is funded. South Wellfields requires ongoing maintenance, which is funded. The Salina Airport Authority Fire Booster Station is ours as well, and takes ongoing maintenance and operation, and it is funded. Those are kind of the high profile items that were identified on the water plant side. Water distribution, as you know, we're trying to do $2 million a year of water main replacements. Recently, we've expedited some projects in response to water quality concerns. Hilldale Road is it buttoned up? It's
completed.
I know knew the water was flowing. I didn't know if there were still some punch list items. Bel Air Court is an identified area that Martha's working on designing and getting costs. And then North 3rd Street is an area that you might be familiar with as another area that's identified that has water quality concerns. We're going to bring two of those three back to you, and we've been expediting those in terms of design and bidding, more as a change order with a contractor that we have a contract with, just in the interest of time and difficulty getting contractor interest at all in terms of turning projects around. Water tower painting, that's just an ongoing item. It's pretty straightforward in terms of the standards and the specs, and Martha and her designers know it backwards and forward, but it is a project to be bid and constructed, and we've got 6 towers? 8 towers in the system.
One's very small. It's out on the hill by the landfill for the rural water districts, but the other ones are large towers that cost several $1,000s to maintain.
Booster pump station maintenance, ongoing item that's budgeted. System extensions to facilitate growth. The River Run Overlook Estates subdivision, the agreement that we entered into 2004 timeframe, committed the city to making an extension from there to either Marymount or Magnolia Road. Martha has that designed. We're working on benefit district, but that will be a financial expense that will be something that we need to incur here pretty soon. 12th and 13th Street, there was some trailer park redevelopment. They are funding quite a bit of that work, but we've identified some connections from one block to the next that would enhance our system and facilitate fire flow in the neighborhood, not just the trailer park. And then the conversations that we've had on an ongoing basis about Holmes and Magnolia in particular, if we could find a way on the water and sewer and street side, those are growth corridors that we could try to be proactive about. And I'm going to run through all these, and then I'll let Martha just give her thoughts across the board. On the wastewater plant side, the plant upgrades, we've talked about those at great length, and that's a sizable project and a sizable price tag that is underway. Deferred maintenance items throughout the system are funded, and we just have to stay on top of them. Biosolids disposal and treatment, we have an approach, but that's just kind of an ongoing thing that we have to stay in contact with property owners and manage the content of the biosolids dictates how we can dispose of it, and we need land to do that on an ongoing basis.
That could change with the PFAS requirements that are being discussed for different facilities. We're trying to make the argument with all the parties to be that it should go back to whoever generated the PFAS as in lieu of us at the wastewater treatment plant that just gets the end result of the forever chemical in the solid. So it's just starting to be a popular topic.
Yeah.
So far the water side is taken front and center, but it'll come that way eventually.
And so as those individual items are regulated, then the concentration of that in our biosolids determines at what rate we can land apply it. And the more they ratchet that down, the more land it takes to dispose of our biosolids. So we then try to work with farmers in close proximity to the treatment plant. We try not to transport it any further than we have to and strike deals with them. So ongoing challenge in the wastewater side of things. And then staffing, recruitment, and retention in particular is something that we have to stay on top of. On the wastewater collection side, lift station maintenance, we have a large number of lift stations throughout the system and have an approach to maintaining them, and it is budgeted. That's just kind of an ongoing challenge for Martha and her staff. System enhancements, again, the Holmes Magnolia areas. Large equipment items that they rely on are a TV truck to TV the sewer system and a Vector truck to suck out and transport solids and sludges. Actually used that in the trench collapse at South High. We're able to pull dirt out of the trench and help that in an emergency scenario there. Manhole rehabs, countless manholes in the system, and we budget for that and have to stay on top of it, as well as slip lining of sewer mains and then force main sewer maintenance. You're going to see a lot of these are budgeted, and it's really a function of being able to get it all in the system, get it bid out, get the work done. And one of the things that we're going to be coming back to you with is more specifics on reserve balances. We have a large balance in the utility fund, but it's there for a reason, and the more clarity that we can provide that we have funds for these purposes and others, the more clarity it gives to the funding and the reserve balance and the utility fund in particular. And then additional responsibilities I touched on, groundwater contamination remediation. We had the settlement from the feds. We're actively working with Dragon, our specialized consultant on treatment design, PFAS. Both PFAS and PFOS are now in the conversation, which caused us to have to go back and look at the treatment design. Not to say that it can't be dealt with. What we've heard so far is may have to change out the filter media more frequently, so there may be some added cost with that. But We're on the verge of breaking ground and seeing some activity that'll be noticeable to the general public as we start to implement testing and treatment design and get treatment installed. And then the river renewal process, or project, there's the special sales tax funding. We secured the RAISE grant funding. We're pursuing a congressional allocation, which hopefully might be an easier path to funding than core funding, but if need be, we can pursue core funding as well. You put all three of those together, and that's about 3 times what we thought we might have in the way of funding just by special sales tax alone. And we're getting started on the RAISE grant aspects of it. And if we can secure the congressional allocation, we'll be in really good shape to really start tackling this project. So I flew through that pretty quickly. I want to give Martha an opportunity to share whatever comments she would like, and it's, from my perspective, lots of big projects that take a lot of time and effort, and then we have pretty solid funding in place for a number of categories. It's just being able to keep up with it all.
I think probably the biggest issue is staffing, for whether you're actually designing a project, putting it out for construction, or if you're on site, keeping up with the contractor. We have had a utility tech position open for well over a year, and I think I could count most of the applicants on my hand, so it's a tough one to hire someone. So we have to be very careful that we don't get more projects out there being constructed than we have people to oversee them. Because contractors are having the same problem we are, finding qualified help, and sometimes it takes an extra eye in the front of your head and in the back of your head to be watching both ways to make sure everything's being constructed appropriately. So staffing, whether it's getting it designed, getting it constructed, or finished out, is the biggest issue. We set in place a progression plan. I think it's probably been in place 7 or 8 years, but we didn't get a lot of activity in our utility department where they could advance from a operator 1 to an operator 2, or utility worker 1, utility worker 2, on up to a senior operator. But all of the categories were so close together in pay range, no one was really interested in making that step up and taking on supervisory roles. So in our last pay plan, we made an adjustment to have a superintendent that oversaw those groups, and we've been able to internally fill, I think, at least 3 of those positions, and I think the one at the water plant will require maybe some outside effort. But through the progression plan, I like to say at least those individuals that work for me right now at those facilities come to work every day and show up and know what they're doing. So I'm more than willing to give them a try to advance and do better, because at least we know what we're getting. The few that I've tried from outside, I haven't been very successful, and we've had very few candidates to pick from. So we're going to try to grow some folks internally, and I think we're going to be successful in 3 out of the 4. The Deputy Director of Utilities, we've been trying for that position for quite some time. The market right now is pretty tough. Everyone says, if you know somebody, let me know, and we all say back, well, if we did, we'd already have hired them. So the demand is pretty high for that utility type work. And Natalie and I spoke with the Executech, which is the headhunter that we have working on that, and right now they're kind of perusing Kansas. Well, I've probably been perusing Kansas for 3 years looking for a candidate, so I think they're going to have to widen their area a little bit, but they seem to have a handle on what they're doing. They're just getting a good start, really. They haven't been engaged for all that long, so they're just getting a good start, and they're starting at the core and working out, but I think they're going to have to get farther. So for me, a director of utilities deputy that can take over some of the daily operations would allow me a lot of freedom on these projects. Prior to now, it's been a lot of getting prepared, getting contracts in the project, but things are getting ready to get ready. We're real busy on the wastewater plant. It'll be under construction starting probably, or out there moving equipment around and getting ready to set up their trailers and get started. Groundwater contaminations, just getting ready, as Mike mentioned, to start. So we'll have construction there that'll be pretty heavy over the next couple of years. And then the river project, as you might remember, lasts into the 2031 date. And we're working on a schedule right now with the consultant to determine how that all fits together in funding and our cash flow that I'm sure we'll be sharing with you in the very near future to how we think we can best move that project forward. But really, having qualified staff is probably the key thing right now. Heard you talk about fire hydrant painting. Someone I know wants her fire hydrant painted just today, so I told her she couldn't paint it, but she could send me a list. We've talked about that a lot, and typically we hire a temporary or someone for the summer to help us. And then during the course, we found that they do make these discs that you can just mount onto the fire hydrant and use those for the color coding. And the color coder, the top of the fire hydrant, lets the fire department know how much water they can expect to get out of that fire hydrant. So if they drive up and see a black hydrant, they keep driving because that means it's less than 500. They like to see the orange and blue bonnet on the top so that they know they have good fire protection. So I think instead of painting the bonnet a different color, we're testing some of those wafers, or I call them, they're like a large washer, and they just mount onto the fire hydrant and you see that color. We've tested a few of them, so we're seeing how everyone feels about that, but I think that would solve the top color. Then our standard color for fire hydrants is high visibility yellow. And I guess it's not high visible after 30 years, it starts fading.
Yeah, my concern is some of them just look awful.
That would be the comment I heard this morning, yes.
Okay.
So they would all get painted yellow, and then we'd put these washers on to identify flow, I think would be our future plan. And again, painting fire hydrants hasn't came to the top of our list. We've been just anxious, and we're still short in water distribution at one time. And Natalie, if I'm wrong, correct me, but I think we might have been down 5 of the utility worker 1 positions out of 14. So pretty good share. Right now, we're just missing 1. And on wastewater collection, we're just missing 1. So we're just starting to get a little extra slack. But then to take up that slack, the fiber folks came to town, and we're spending quite a bit of time locating water and sewer and storm drain and all of those utilities. We're rotating through our staff to find out who is our most efficient locators, and we found there's quite a difference between some of the different individuals are much quicker than others at getting the job done. So we're working on that. Monty's tracking how long does it take to do these locates and see and I check with him about every 2 or 3 days, and right now we only have 1 locate on our list. But Wednesday, for whatever reason, they kind of come in, and those are the ones that put a crunch on us because we have to have those done by Friday. We have 48 hours to get them done, but we have 2 people doing the locates right now, and they're staying caught up. But a lot of the times it's just a remark, so you go out there and just refresh what you've done because they didn't get there in time, and after 15 days, I think is the actual number, you have to go back and remark. So
Are they keeping notes for the next fiber company that comes in? I think
they are actually keeping data of that. We started doing it just to be able to determine did we need to ask for an additional staff member immediately to keep up. And so we've looked ahead and determined that during fire hydrant flushing, water distribution can get a couple people from wastewater, and we can still keep our most efficient people doing the locate. So we have a lot of balls in the air trying to keep operations going.
The concerning thing to me about the locates is we don't control that workload, that volume, that schedule, and we are on the clock for 48 hours. So as they come in, we don't have a choice but to drop everything and respond.
I had a question on the water main replacement. We always budget $2 million a year, and I know we were having troubles getting that money spent. If that $2 million is not spent, does it get set in a bucket to be spent down the road, or how do you handle that?
It stays in our capital, let me get the word right, capital reserve fund, and then in our operating budget, one of the two.
So it just stays in the balance?
Yeah, currently it's going to the operating fund balance, but the point I was making earlier is if we segment that further, it'll add some clarity to the intended uses of those funds, and it doesn't it doesn't allow for any,
Yeah, I know we just weren't
confusion.
getting it in, being able to get it done. The other one is on the 12th and 13th Street trailer park. I know, from what I understand, we had to loop some water for fire protection. Do you know where we're at on that? Because I know that'll open up, geez, I don't know how many trailer
I
homes
think
for.
you're going to see that in the very near future. I'm working on my staff
Okay.
report right now, and I'm reviewing it through staff.
Yeah.
The intent was to have it come to you on the 24th. One of the issues that slowed that down was an easement across some private property. And Dean worked with the Bennington State Bank and the staff there to get it to where it can be signed off on. But we just recently, in about the last week and a half, got that completed. So that's what they have.
Because I believe there's some trailers sitting back there, but
There
they can't
is.
be occupied
And-
because of the
And
fact that.
I think they installed 27, and they have 21 sitting there. And it may sound like they've been waiting on us all the time.
Thank
but
you. I was
that's
gonna go there.
really, you know, I don't like to make those comments because it never sounds good, but the process of getting everything through and review came very slow, and we've been working on trying to get the easement part, and the other part was cost, trying to decide what's a fair share for that. It's kind of a connection between 12th and 13th Street, which otherwise this new manufactured homes would have been on the end of an 8-inch dead-end line, which never makes me feel good about fire protection. So we figured all that out. I think we're real close, but it took us quite a while to get an actual cost estimate, believe it or not, probably 5 or 6 rounds to what really applies to that piece that we're doing. And I believe we now have that. We're on about our 4th gyration, but I think we have everything we need to finish it, and we've got the easement about a week, maybe 2 weeks at most. So we're putting it together for your review. So,
Okay.
but it's been a painful road we've hoed there, I will say, to get to where we are today.
We've worked heavily with the owner developer and tried to help them figure it out.
Even took the sign permits to Topeka and gave them to them so they could get them to KDHE quicker. And we tried a lot of things to help them, but it's just some of the things just take longer than you anticipate.
Yeah, I assume they're facing some of the designer staffing struggles we are, so.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
General question that would probably cover all departments. How far out from Salina do we go looking for new employees? A two-part question. And do we offer any incentives? I'll just make up one. Hey, we'll give you, free rent for 2 months, or, I don't want to
Right.
make up others that might get put in the record. But I mean, are we doing anything to get people to move more than 100 miles and make it worth their while to move here?
Yeah, for select positions, we will pay some or all of their relocation expenses, so we'll work with them, but that's usually a higher level position in the organization. As far as breadth of putting the word out, if we're putting it in trade journals, some of those are national and state or multi-region, and then the different social media that we use is not really geographically limited. Part of it's getting them to get a level of interest in Salina and take a look.
Because right now, obviously, we're going to have to steal from other places, as other places would probably try to steal from us. But I don't know are there like local job fairs? I mean, because some of these positions, I'm getting the impression you might be looking for people who, and I may be selling them short, aren't necessarily looking in the trade journal for an entry-level job. I mean, are there job fairs, halfway across the state, or other places we can find folks?
Natalie has done
Natalie's
several here, but
Yes, I know we go locally, and then we also advertise on Indeed
Yeah.
for a number of our positions, but since Natalie's here, I'll let her talk.
So we haven't done a lot of job fairs outside of our area, but we have done a couple. We will occasionally get specials on different, either special print publications or different outside of our community with newspapers. Several have been west of here, west and south. We've tried that. A lot of times we don't really recruit for our entry-level positions too far outside of those areas because of the expense of relocating and the fact that we don't have the funds. And we do hear some feedback as far as if they're not already living here, finding it difficult to have housing here that they can afford, and hopefully that will be changing in the near future. And then, yeah, so those entry level, we do focus. Jacob mentioned Indeed. That has risen to the top of our recruitment just across the board. We've engaged more in that. I'm trying to think. Up to the executive level, yeah, it's been nationwide.
Does that entry require much tech expertise? Do they need to have certain classes, certain abilities to be able to take those jobs?
It varies. Some of Martha's more technical positions, they do need a specific foundation and understanding, but like our utility workers, someone with solid mechanical aptitude.
And do we have
usually
any
find a way.
program for teaching those training in those specifics? And I'm thinking, you know, are we in the high schools talking to the kids there about a track on, you know, government service? Or
That I went to job fairs at the high schools and actually taken a.
how about ladies? You know, let's focus on the young ladies and see if we can.
I've went to K-State of Salina and done their STEM program and several different aspects. I've just determined that something about a 24/7 job and wastewater, we need to refocus our names so that.
Some rebranding.
And rebranding because that when you start your presentation and you say that, and you can just see the frown come up on their face, but then you try to make it interesting. But it's, and many different facilities have rebranded themselves and gave different names, but the one thing I've learned lately, no matter what you call yourself, most people still know what it is and are not. The wastewater side is the hardest we have to hire people at our treatment plant. We get more applicants for water plant, but in my discussions with other colleagues, I kept laying the blame on them for taking all of the people to eastern Kansas or wherever. But in my recent discussions, I'm finding out they're having as much trouble hiring people as we are. And the last I was on with Olathe and Johnson County, large eastern portion, and St. Louis and Springfield and out of Omaha and Lincoln, Nebraska, and they're all fighting the same fight, and they're looking for creative ways to entice people to come to work for them. In some of the description of anything, Michael probably kicked me, but they were talking from trying to figure out how to let some of their employees work from home to more flexibility to just all different things, and that's where they were resorting to just to start finding some of the help. But I can't blame them anymore for taking all the people in eastern Kansas because they don't have them either. They're still looking too, but it's going to take, they're looking to be creative. Mike has asked me if they've came up with any plans that are working, and they're just starting to implement and put them in play right now. See how it works out, but they're trying to get creative.
Can we subsidize housing for a year or two? I mean, it'd have to be reimbursed to make sure they stay here, but yeah, if you stay here 2 years, we'll reimburse you. You know, if they move so many miles to get here. But
We can, what I've taken a note on is hiring strategies and moving subsidies. We can certainly take a look at that. We can come back to you with what that might look like and what that might cost.
And we'll just call Martha's department the Department of Vital Services Facilitation.
I will tell you that if our water and wastewater systems don't work, we are the first to know about. Even if it's not our fault, we usually hear about it. So they're pretty important, and they do count on us to.
But you did a great job with the term biosolids. I mean, you know, you could talk about that in church and no one would know what you're talking about.
Well, they'll give up that it's wastewater. They won't be concerned that it's wastewater chunks. They'll be happy.
With the improvements to the wastewater plant, will there be further automation?
Well, I was going to bring that one up, but it's a little ways down the road in timing in my planning process, but with the wastewater plant, yes, there will be a lot more automation and more needs for technical staff that deal with the programmable logical controllers and be able to actually look through those systems and decide where the breakdown is. Otherwise, if we have to bring someone, typically they're out of Kansas City and it's very costly to get them here. We try to design redundancy in, so if one fails, we can still produce water or other ends, but there's going to be much more technical aspects. And also with the treatment building that's going to be out at the air base for the contaminants, including PFAS, will be similar, I think, to our South Water Plant, that we monitor it and do it locally. But those things all require maintenance, and that takes a different level than what I would call our standard maintenance mechanic. So we're looking at a little bit of a regrouping of our maintenance folks to where we use water plant and wastewater plant staff, that there's a main mechanic there, but there's also another that could work back and forth, or a group that could work on larger projects. Sometimes it's difficult to accomplish something if you just have one maintenance mechanic and it's a challenging project. And included with that would be some type of a technical person to really deal with what's coming down the road for all of the technical aspects. But it's not something that our current operators have had a lot of experience with. But it's going to be very important between our South plant and wastewater plant and groundwater contamination. Much more automation, and knowing how to make all of those components talk to each other and work is.
Then you'll be fighting for the same people that
We already are.
Tony's and Kubota are.
Yeah, you hear them advertising for control techs, and I've mentioned that we have a very good person right now, and if we need to make sure we take care of them, or one of those folks might snag him for one of those higher paid tech projects.
I have a question on the river project bridge replacements.
Okay.
When that's going to get underway and where we're at on the core funding.
Okay, let me see. I don't know which one's the easiest out of that. The core funding, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is trying to get funding to carry on with their feasibility study. And that our share could be $1 million, their share could be $1 million. So that's a number that they can only ask for money for, that they can spend and have a project for. The construction hasn't even really came into the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers budgeting process till they have the feasibility study done and all of the steps that we currently work through only with the new process. And so, but we have provided information to Senator Moran to try to work with us and help us get some additional dollars, and I know Mike's had many conversations on that too.
Well, and I'm describing it as a direct congressional appropriation. There was a process to apply for that. Been in contact with them. If we're lucky enough to secure that, it's more direct funding than the core process that Martha described. We're simultaneously working with the core, and you may recall it. The price tag and the scope of that project transitioned us out of kind of more of a administrative process where they could fund it directly to a much more detailed process. So our hope at the moment is a congressional appropriation. We hope to know more soon.
One of the snags with that is if they call the Corps tells them they need $200,000, which is what they told us for their 1 year, but they really need $1 million for the feasibility. And I said we really needed the dollars for the entire project. So I'm not sure how it's going to shake out amongst all of them, but we've been beating the bushes, and we have nothing definitive, but the last call was to get dollars for 2024. So.
But we have the money for the bridges, right?
The bridges, okay, the RAISE grant.
Yeah.
And we do have the money for the bridges through the RAISE grant, and we do like the idea of building those bridges while there's no water flow in the channel. So the Corps coming in after that or towards the end works well in our schedule. The bridges, basically the goal right now, or our schedule, is to have all of those and the work completed by 2030. And the drop dead date for the raise grant is to have every penny spent is, I think, September 30th of 2031. But our goal is to be all done with the bridges in 2030. We had thought we were going to try to bid them in 3 different increments, but just recently the highway folks have wanted to kind of limit that and just have us build it in one project and have all of our dollars spent by, or allocated, have the project bid by the end of 2026. So that means a large
I thought the
project.
bridges were going to get underway sooner.
Well, the unfortunate thing, working with all of the feds and getting our contract reviewed, has a 9-month schedule. It takes about 9 months to get all that put into play. Then HDR, with this process, has to have the entire design done before we build the first bridge, which is a snag that we just learned about a week and a half ago, and I haven't got the new schedule. I was talking with Eric Dove earlier, so that's a little bit of a snag because now we're going to get everything designed and then go out for construction for the entire package and tie up all the dollars by the end of 2026. So the work might happen quicker with all of it designed instead of staggering it, but there won't be, as far as bridge construction, it will not start till after that 2026 date. As it stands today now, unless we make some other
If we
argument.
can talk them out of it.
Yeah, which, right now, the real issue they're having is there's all of these projects and funding, and they are, I guess, I just put it bluntly, don't have a lot of staff either. So they're trying to, if you've got dollars to spend, they want you to get your part done as quick as they can because there's, 4 more years of this to come down the pike of different projects for between water and wastewater and these type of projects. So they're trying to get everybody to get everything done as quick as they can because each year there's another round of projects and they're struggling with staff. When we tried to find someone to work with, whether it be KDOT or the highway group, they kept pointing their fingers at each other, and then we decided they just want us to go it on our own and not be a subsidiary to one of their groups. So they have been very reluctant to take on and help us a lot, would be my answer. They're busy. I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel like it has to do with having manpower on their end to manage it, and they want to shove everything through the funnel as quick as they can, get that project going, and be ready for the next round of them. That's the latest schedule and what we got from our local folks at the highway was that schedule. That's what they want us to do.
I don't know if we'll
Haven't got
be
it in
able to talk
writing
them out
yet.
of that or not,
No,
but
haven't got it in writing, but I'm supposed to be, we're working on that. It doesn't appear we're going to be able to talk them out of it. They don't seem friendly to that idea.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Tasker? Okay, I guess we get back together
the 18th.
18th, and
So I owe you a work product in between, so we'll tabulate all this up and kind of give you a summary document to work from. And we'll get that distributed in advance of the 18th and back to you in advance of the 18th, and then we'll regroup.
okay, and I believe that was was that like from 9 to 2? I can't.
Yeah.
Somebody said 9 to 2, and somebody said 9 to 3.
I need to
don't
double
know.
check. On my calendar, it's 9 to 2, but I think
What I
we had
had.
some conversation that the communication went out differently, so I'll need to verify that.
Okay. Okay, with that, I will accept a
Move we adjourn?
Second.
Got a motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, see you next week.